Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this special meeting of 1st of February's Planning West Committee. It's a reminder to all present that this and the afternoon committee are separate meetings with separate agendas. We're not expecting a fire drill today, so should the fire alarm sound, please leave the building by the fire exits clearly indicated, and the gathering point is behind behind the courts. This meeting is being recorded and will be streamed to YouTube. Therefore, any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes you any concern, can you please let me know now? Okay, thank you for that. Right, we'll now start. What I'm going to do is slightly unusual because there have been a couple of update sheets. It's two pages, both A4, both slightly less than a page. So there are 2 sheets of paper in front of all the committee members. They have been published on the website for the public to see. I'm just going to give you 3 minutes to read those, if you'd be so kind. Thank you. Oh, yeah, they were published online. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a typo. Yeah. The typo. Yeah. But I've got to make it formal. Okay, well, I assume everybody's had the opportunity to read the update sheet, so we'll progress the meeting. Item 1 on our agenda is apologies for absence. Josh?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Ross Henley and we have Councillor Marcus Kravis, who is subbing in today, and we also have Councillor Rosemary Woods, who is not present, and Councillor Derek Perry as well.
Thank you very much, Josh. Okay. Item 3, declarations of interest. Councillors, are any declarations other than your standard ones of membership of parish councils, etc.? Councillor Farberhey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know some of the residents sitting here. Some of them were ex-teachers of my son, so I just thought I'd bring that to attention. Not that my son has done well as a result of it, so I have personal, sort of issue with that. So I leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. This is the perils of being a local councillor. You actually get to know people in your patch. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add that those same teachers of Councillor Faharby's son are also my colleagues, ex-colleagues at the school I used to work at.
Seeing any other? Oh, sorry, Dave.
Must admit, slightly uncertain on whether I should declare or not. I mean, I will mention, as I'm sure other councillors too received a number of things in the emails. I will say I haven't listed them, and I believe I've received exactly the same as other members. I think I need to say something in relation to item 5. where I'm the ward member. I have commented on the application. I believe though that you know I have kept and continue to keep an open mind on the application and its merits. So I believe that you know I'm okay to take part in the
Okay,
on that one.
I'm sure that's true, and I'm sure that at the appropriate point in the meeting, you will consider all the evidence and make your decision then. Councillor Ellis.
Sorry, I just remembered, I think I signed Councillor Dawn's petition about the green wedge review on the basis that it was flawed technical advice and they wanted the committee, which did consider it, to reconsider. But I am perfectly capable of looking at the application that relates to with an open mind.
Good.
And I
Thank
wish
you
to
for
make that
If you
clear.
Hold on, I'll just double check with the lawyer, but I think that's probably okay. We're happy that's been declared. So, okay, go.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to say I'm the other ward member for item number 5, but I have had no involvement with the application whatsoever.
Thank you for that. I'm not seeing anybody else, so we'll move on. Item 4 is public question time. I'm not aware of any.
Correct, Chair. We've only got public speakers in the applications themselves.
Okay, in that case, we'll press on. So we're going to move on to item 5, which is planning application 42/24/0330, and it's for land at Comisrow Road, Troll, A-line planning for up to 125 dwellings. The planning officer is Paul Sherman, so I'm going to invite Paul to present his report.
It's actually item 4. No, that's wrong. That's item 3, and this is item 4.
Okay, it says item 5 in my paper, but that's fine. So apparently technically it's item 4. Anyway, it's the report. It's
It's item 4 on my bit.
yeah.
Chair.
Yeah. Might help to use the right papers. It is indeed item 4, which I apologise to people. And as I say, this is an outline application. So with all matters reserved except for access for the erection of 125 dwellings with public open space, landscaping, sustainable urban drainage systems and principal means of access from Comisrow Road and College Way on land at Comisrow Road, Troll. And the case officer is still Paul Sherman, so I'm going to move over to Paul now and invite him to present the report. Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as we've heard, this application is an outline application for 125 homes on land at Comisrow. Is that any better? See if I can hold it up. That's okay. So it's an outline application for 125 homes on land at Comisrow Trull. So this slide shows the location of the site. On the left, you can see it outlined in red, and on the right, its location in relation to Taunton and Trull and the surrounding area. Got a bit of a delay between my laptop and the screen. So that is the application site superimposed on an aerial view of the site. You can see from that the urban development to the west and south, open agricultural fields to the east, and to the north, the fields and playing fields associated with the school. This plan shows the policy designations from our local plan proposals map. You can see that the site forms part of a green wedge to the south of the school playing fields. Other things to note from this slide is the site is within the settlement area, and the hatched purple is the Comisrow urban extension, which will see more development to the west and south of the site. It's an outline application, so all the plans associated are indicative. This is an indicative framework master plan, But things to note from this plan are a central spine road connecting an access to the north and an access to the south, areas shown in purple for potential development, and landscaping, SUDs, play space features also shown on the indicative master plan. This is a highways indicative layout. So again, the only matters in detail are the access points at either end of the site. But again, this shows the potential route for the internal connecting road between those points of access and how the internal road layout could be delivered. But that would all be something for reserve matters. Again, we have a building heights indicative plan showing generally 2-storey dwellings and a slightly zoomed in version of the indicative master plan. Split into two, with the northern section on your left and the southern section on the right. And these are the highways drawings of the 2 potential access points. Again, that's the extent of the level of detail we have in terms of the access points. Everything internal will be a matter for reserve matters. I've included this slide. You'll see from your report that the site and the application deliver a number of transport related improvements. The orange or yellow dashed line shows the option for delivery of a through internal connecting road. The green line is Comitro Lane, and given that this includes 2 points of access and a connecting road, it allows the option to improve that as a green link for cyclists and pedestrians and downgrade the extent to which vehicles use that route. The orange lines are pedestrian cycle improvements. So the scheme would deliver a significant footway cycleway improvement on College Road to the north of the site and a smaller section on Comitro Road to the south of the site. And the blue stars are the local bus stops, and you'll note from the papers that the scheme secures a contribution to improve the local bus stop infrastructure. Next, we have some indicative street scenes. This one's Comitro Road, showing the existing housing on Comitro Road and a potential new entrance to the site. Again, should be noted that these are all indicative, including the heights are not for determination today. And that's an indicative section of College Way and the entrance. Take you through some site photographs. So this is from Comitro Road looking towards the new access point for the site, and the site is on your right hand side. That's a view from Comitro Road looking into the site. That's the existing field access. You can just about see there an access to a residential property to the left. That's a view from within the site looking back towards the houses on Barton Way. That's another view of the site looking across the agricultural fields. The application site we're talking about is the muddy brown fields. The green that you can see raising up in the background is also within the green wedge, but that's outside the application site and no developments proposed on those fields. It's a view looking along the public footpath which runs through the site, looking north towards the fields of the school beyond the playing fields. That's another view roughly from the public footpath looking up towards Troll Ridge, and you can see the green fields and the land rising up towards the ridge. It's a similar view from a slightly different point in the footpath. And then now we'll have a look from Honiton Road. This is the road that runs across the top of Troll Ridge. This is a view looking south. The application site is on the lower part of the land to your right of shot. So it's not those fields, it's the fields further along. That is a view from the top of Claremont Lane and Honiton Road looking down across the site. So you can see the green field in the foreground is not in the site. So that's not proposed for development. It's the field, slither of brown field that you can see right at the bottom of the hill. That's a view from the top of that field. Looking down, again, the field we're standing in is not proposed for development. It's the lighter brown fields that run in the far point of the shot where the housing is already located. It's a view from a similar vantage point, looking slightly further north towards the school and the electricity substation. And that's a view. There's an existing field access to the eastern part of the green wedge. And again, to note from this is the level change where the housing is promoted is at the bottom of that hill. Have a look. These are now some views from Claremont Lane. There's some existing field accesses. So the gate on your right is the corner of the application site, and the gate on your left, looking up the hill, is the other part of the green wedge that's not proposed for development. And another view from Claremont Lane, looking back, so the application site is on your left. Claremont Lane runs down and joins College Way. Now we're on to College Way. That is the existing development. That's the broad location of the proposed new access. The access will be on the left-hand side there. That's a view from slightly further back on the left-hand side where that large grey car is. You can just see the edge of the electricity substation. And the proposed new access from College Way would be in that centre of shot. So as is set out in your report, key considerations for this application. The site is in a sustainable location within the existing urban area. While the site forms part of the designated green wedge, it complies with the core objectives of the development plan when read as a whole. The council does not have a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore the tilted balance applies, and the provision of housing and affordable housing should be given significant weight. While there will be harm to local landscape, this is more than outweighed by the benefits of the scheme, and the scheme is capable of delivering a high quality scheme in design and placemaking terms. Got a couple of slides on planning balance. As a reminder, para 11D, the NPPF tells us what we need to do when applying the tilted balance. It says planning permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme. And when undertaking that balance, it requires us to give significant weight to the policies of the framework, particularly those including directing development to sustainable locations, making the best use of land, securing well-designed places and providing affordable housing. And this is a slide which summarises our planning balance, which you can find at the end of your report. And in the green, we've listed the benefits of the scheme. Officers consider that market and affordable housing should each be given significant weight. Pedestrian and cycle highway infrastructure carry moderate weight in favour of the proposal, as does biodiversity net gain and surface water drainage improvements. And the new public open space and the economic benefits of the scheme should also carry limited weight. In terms of the harm column, officers consider the significant harm to the local landscape, and there's limited harm to the setting of the conservation area, and very limited / negligible harm to the character of the area into residential amenity. And officers' view, when weighing those harms and benefits in the context of para 11D of the NPPF, the benefits of the scheme clearly outweigh the harm caused. Accordingly, the report recommends that planning permission should be granted, subject to the conditions set out in your report and the amendments to the conditions set out in your update sheet. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good, thank you for that. We're going to move on to the public speakers now, and just so everybody is clear in understanding, there's a microphone system. So when I call your name, if you come to the public speaking desk, and when you're comfortable and ready, if you push the right hand button, the light will come on your microphone, and your 3 minutes starts when you start speaking. Okay, so the first name on my list is Sam Allen, please. Mr. Allen. As I say, when you're comfortable, push the right hand button.
Now, there are many reasons to object to this proposal, but I'm going to concentrate, because I've only got 3 minutes, on only one of the key issues, and that's the potential loss of the Troll Ridge Green Wedge and the detrimental impact that will have on Trull and Staple Hay. Trull, as you probably know, is a village development within Taunton, and it has a really profound sense of local community. And that's something that's only possible because of the protection afforded by the Green Wedge. Trull has a very different feel from Comitrow and Galmington, and surely the maintenance of richly diverse communities and green spaces is something the council should be actively promoting and not allowing developers to ride roughshod over. The executive summary in the application acknowledges that the proposed development will result in the loss of green wedge land, as we've just seen, and will result in harm to the local landscape. But a review to remove the green wedge status was considered by the Planning and Transport Policy Subcommittee just 3 weeks ago, and the entire review was rejected because the subcommittee simply wasn't satisfied with the review work undertaken, and specifically the recommendation of the Trull Green Wedge. Now, from an outsider's perspective, it beggars belief that 2 weeks after building in the Green Wedge was rejected, or removal of the Green Wedge status was rejected, that clear decision was made, and then officers are recommending building on the same Green Wedge. I mean, was that other meeting just a complete waste of everybody's time and council taxpayers' money? This is important because once green land is built on, it's irreversible. The council's own statement of community involvement promises to give the general public the opportunity to respond to consultations and influence decisions in their area. And building on green wedge land without proper consultation flies in the face of this promise. Now, the box-ticking technocrats will tell you that the Trull Green Wedge doesn't tick all the boxes to prevent the coalescence of Trull and Comitrow. But I am here as a resident of over 26 years to tell you that it very clearly, de facto, does just that. So as it stands, this proposal goes against the extant development plan, the Trull neighbourhood plan, the Green Wedge review decision, the Garden Town vision, the council's statement of community involvement, and the views of local people as expressed by the town council, the parish council, 114 letters of objection, and a petition of over 1,000 verified signatures. I honestly think the committee has no option but to reject this application. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. People online, we were getting quite a lot of feedback then. Can I ask you all to mute your microphones, please? I don't really want to hear your domestic woes. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Allen. I'm sorry there was an interruption. Alan Sawyer is the next person on my list. Mr. Sawyer, are you here? Again, sir, when you're sitting and you're comfortable, push the right-hand button, the light comes on, and your 3 minutes begins when you start speaking. One moment. Oh, right, okay. When you're ready, Mr. Sawyer. Thank you, sir.
The recommendation before you places reliance on the same Green Wedge boundary review, which has been rejected unanimously by your Transport and Planning Subcommittee due to its flawed assessment of the Trull Ridge. Despite this, you are told that a rejected review should be given some weight, whilst the adopted Trull and Staple Hay neighbourhood plan should not. That makes no sense. The review stated that Trull Ridge already acts to coalesce the Comitrow and Trull settlements. But how on earth can a green wedge coalesce settlement? Trull Ridge was classified as green wedge in 2015, and as nothing physical has changed since then, it should retain its green wedge status now. The requirement for a green wedge to have a direct link to open countryside is not in policy CP8. But if it is now required, then please redefine Trull Ridge as an urban green space, as it has been in the past, and retain and enhance it in line with your core strategy. This green lung makes a significant contribution to the health and well-being of so many residents. Replacing it with the tree-lined path and the small play area is totally inadequate. The benefit from building on it does not outweigh the consequential loss to public health and well-being, nor the loss of a village's identity. The recommendation before you states that the higher fields would remain free from development. Yet if this application is approved, you will be signing the death certificate of Trull, as it will not then be possible to deny the separate development scheme announced last week for those same fields. And with those gone and the coalescence of Trull on the west side of Hollington Road complete, the Vivery Green Wedge will be next in the crosshairs of developers, and the village community identity of Trull will be gone forever. And please don't rely on planning conditions or S106s to address the shortcomings. The planning department has not been prepared to enforce local breaches when informed of them in the past, and now has neither the budget nor the manpower to do so, and developers know this. I appreciate the council's under pressure to demonstrate it has a 5-year housing land supply, but your housing and land availability assessment scheduled for published this spring may well produce more appropriate sites to achieving that objective. Once lost, this green lung cannot be restored. Somerset Council's vision is to put people at the heart of everything we do and to promote a greener, healthier environment. So please, listen to your people and support their aspirations and refuse this application. Thank you.
If I appreciate the support for the speakers, but can I ask you not to applaud everybody, please? Because otherwise you'll start booing when somebody says something to the contrary. So if we can remain civil, that would be wonderful. The next public speaker on my list is Alan Paul, please. Mr. Paul, when you're ready, sir, come to the committee, come to the chair, make yourself comfortable, push the right hand button. I don't know why I'm telling you this, Mr. Paul, you know it all well. But when you're ready, your 3 minutes start when you start speaking, sir. Thank you and welcome.
I'm a former county Taunton Dean and parish councillor for Cummitro, and I chaired a residents' action group at the Orchard Grove planning. All that was back in the dark ages. I wish to endorse, first of all of the objections by...
Mr. Paul, I'm really sorry to do this to you. I'm struggling to hear you, even with additional hearing. Can you bring the speaker a bit closer?
Can, yes.
Could we perhaps ask you to start again? Would you reset the clock?
I do beg your pardon. Right, okay. I'm a former county dean and parish councillor for Cummitro, back in the dark ages, and I chaired a resident action group at the Orchard Grove planning. I want, first of all, to endorse all the objections raised by so many residents of Trull and by our local councillor, Dawn Johnson. I want to stress two things in particular. On the lack of secondary school places, local ones, schools admissions officers were not allowed to object to the Orchard Grove application because places exist in some of the less popular schools in Taunton. They told me this. And this new development is also in the catchment of our hugely oversubscribed local secondary school. So that means every new family house that is built with this application, yet another family in the wider Trull area, still within Castle catchment, will have to drive their children across town to a school they haven't chosen, adding to Taunton's traffic congestion. Second issue is transport links. Now, one of the planning conditions at Orchard Grove was to ensure that there was no direct access for cars into Cummitro. Why? Because it would add to rat running through residential roads to avoid congestion on Wellington Road into town. It would also add to commuter parking on residential roads. Now, this application, as far as I know, is the first challenge to that planning condition. Now, maybe it's only for a very small estate at first, but we know developers won't stop there. They've already pushed their limits on every planning condition they can. If you agree to this access directly into Cummitro, it will be used as a precedent time and again to appeal when you try to stop much more serious breaches of existing planning conditions. Lastly, If this application is granted, please do whatever you can to stop the developer weaseling out of a commitment to 25% social and affordable housing. This happened at Orchard Grove in a farcical planning committee meeting using letters so redacted that no one could read them. I've actually sat through, you believe it or not, 35 years of planning meetings on and off, and under all political administrations over those years. So as I'm never going to speak at council again, I want to say at the end, the common factor in all of this is that planning regulations were and still are a developer's charter. Thank you.
Perfect timing, but I expected no less. Thank you, Mr. Paul. The next member of the public on my list is Mr. Paul Dean, please. Mr. Dean? Again, same thing. When you're
So it's
comfortable,
already on red, is it?
he's left the microphone on for you.
Yeah. looks
So
like it.
when you're ready. Okay.
Right. Right. Good morning. My name is Paul Dean. I'm a resident of Trull, adjacent to the proposed development. I'm speaking against this proposal. The land is part of the Green Wedge. On the 4th of February this year, its status as a Green Wedge was reinforced when the proposal to change that status was rejected by your Planning and Transport Subcommittee. So use of the change proposals as a reference to this planning application is totally unacceptable. On many occasions, I have seen foxes and other wildlife in the field. Only in this last month, I have filmed a group of several deer feeding and roaming across the wedge. Deer, I believe, sleep close to their feeding areas. Furthermore, there is an abundance of bird life that returns year and year, particularly green woodpeckers. I have also seen bats flying in the early evenings. I have personally maintained the grass-stroke wild flora in the interspace between our fence and the farmer's barbed wire fence for the last 24 years. And for many of those years, I have seen animal tracks in the interspace, either foxes or maybe badgers. The fields are a haven for wildlife, which returns year and year, which will be lost forever if this proposal is approved. Privacy is seriously compromised by this proposal, particularly to the houses in Barton Green. Their existing gardens are short, and the proximity of the proposed new build provides line of sight into the rear rooms of the houses, particularly the bedrooms. Clearly an unacceptable position. Traffic, there is clearly going to be a significant increase in traffic on the Comitro Road through the proposed development as drivers seek a shortcut. This will increase the risk to pedestrians, particularly children who live in the area, plus those that may subsequently live in the proposed development. The road through will be a rat run and will be a no-go area, particularly for children. There is also no safe pedestrian access from Deptford Road to the new development, apart from a grassed area, which I have personally maintained for the last 24 years. On the 18th of February, I listened to our local MP and one of your senior planning personnel. We were told that the planners seek contribution from developers for services, but even if they succeed, that contribution would not necessarily go to provide the services for a new development. This at best is a disturbing situation. With regard to schools, it is not obvious schooling will be available for the new development, particularly 11+. In conclusion, the area is part of the Green Wedge, the status of which was recently reinforced. There will be considerable damage to the wild areas, wildlife and their habitat. There will be significant detriment to the existing properties with serious inversion of privacy and light. There will be significant increase in traffic and consequential noise and hazard to the public, particularly children. There is no obvious position for schooling both at primary and senior level. There will be significant challenges for the NHS and other service providers. There is significant opposition from the local community for a development which is not needed. As a result, I, along with many Trull residents, respectfully ask that your planning application be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dean. The next, thank you, sir. The next individual on my list is Carolyn Warburton, please. Carolyn. Okay, you will need to push the right hand button when you're comfortable and ready to speak. And welcome.
Chair, members, you are the custodians of Taunton Garden Town, committed to landscape-led planning, green infrastructure and settlement identity. The Troll Ridge Green Wedge serves that critical and strategic purpose. It prevents the merging of Taunton and Trull, Its designation reflects community wishes, council adoption and inspector endorsement. This application sits within that wedge protected by policy CP8. CP8 is part of the statutory development plan and remains up to date. The Supreme Court in Hopkins Holmes and the High Court in Wavendon confirmed that individual policies do not become out of date simply because the tilted balance applies. CP8 is not a housing supply policy and is fully consistent with the NPPF. It therefore carries full weight. The strength or weakness of the wedge is not the test. This area has been designated. That is the end of the matter unless the plan is lawfully changed. That is what gives the planning system integrity and predictability. The recommendation relies heavily on the emerging Green Wedge review. That review is untested, unexamined and unadopted. Personal views, even yours, about the merits of the wedge are not the basis for decision making. Emerging evidence carries very limited weight. It cannot override adopted policy. Using it as the primary justification for approval would predetermine the local plan. The policy requires the wedge to be retained and enhanced. The officer's report accepts that this proposal conflicts with CP8. Under planning law, that conflict should be decisive unless material considerations clearly outweigh it. Members must, of course, consider material considerations, but only strong, site-specific and compelling considerations can outweigh adopted policy. Generic housing numbers do not. Standard market housing does not. Benefits that can be delivered elsewhere do not. And there is no national policy imperative that requires development in this specific location. If housing numbers override CP8 here, they override it everywhere. All wedges are created equal. This location is already under pressure. Schools are full, GP and dental provision is oversubscribed. Access onto Honiton Road and Combitro Lane competes with Orchard Grove. Drainage is an existing problem. Adding more homes here without strategic infrastructure is not sustainable development. The adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The benefits of a small number of houses are generic and can be delivered elsewhere. The harm to the Green Wedge is specific, strategic and irreversible. The correct and lawful conclusion is refusal. Refusal.
Perfect timing. Thank you for that. The next individual on my list is Tony Smith, please. Again, when you're ready, Mr. Smith, and you're comfortable, push the right hand button. The light comes on, and your 3 minutes start when you start speaking. If you get quite close to the microphone, please, it helps the microphone system.
Councillors, the Troll Ridge Green Wedge is a significant material consideration. Your policy CP8 requires that green wedges be retained and enhanced. Amongst the objectors are Troll Parish and Taunton Town Councils, Natural England and your landscape officer. The last-minute highways response should have included an up-to-date local traffic survey, an objective analysis of the impact of site-generated traffic, and reference to the increasing congestion caused by cars parked by Musgrove staff and visitors. In October 2024, the LLFA suspended their judgment, pending the supply of much more information. The applicant's consultants, Water Environment Limited, declined to provide that information at outline and considered the LLFA's 2 litres per second discharge limit unreasonably onerous. That is an explicit policy F1 of the neighbourhood plan, and its S1 sustainable design must improve flood management. There has been no response from the Environment Agency or Wessex Water. Your quality review panel wants a full review before reserve matters. Their influence will be circumvented if outline permission is granted today. There are no drainage plans for surface or foul water on or off-site. Learn from Orchard Grove. The developers illustrative master plan is a contradiction in terms. Amongst other consultees requesting more information are your placemaking officer and ecology services and Somerset Wildlife Trust. There is no evidence the protected species site surveys are up to date. The existing neighbourhood plan is being reviewed. The case officer claims that there is no conflict. At 2.3.1, that plan states, we must achieve our aims without relinquishing our agricultural setting or the green wedges that help Taunton to breathe. They protect areas of landscape importance and visual amenity. Councillors, granting permission for this application today would be premature and perverse. This application alone would obliterate half the Troll Ridge green wedge, and that precedent would put all the other green wedges at risk. Developers are waiting to pounce. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. The next person on my list is Martine Norton, please. Martine. Welcome, and you've heard me say it before, but when you're comfortable, the red light is on, so your 3 minutes start when you begin speaking, and thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Martine Norton. I'm the Chair of Troll Parish Council. I represent the residents of Troll and the Parish Council, and I'm here today to explain why this application for 125 dwellings on Troll Ridge Green Wedge must be refused. The most critical point is this. The Troll Ridge Green Wedge exists for a reason. Policy CP8 of our core strategy states clearly that these areas shall be retained and enhanced. As my fellow resident, Mr. Alan Sawyer, just said, the green fields that the planning officer highlighted as green in his pictures are also subject to another planning application. If this application is approved, the entire green wedge will be built upon, leaving no green fields. The developer's case relies heavily on the Green Wedge Review, which labelled this site as weak. However, on the 4th of February, the Planning and Transport Subcommittee voted not to adopt that review. Members were not satisfied with the evidence. By rejecting the review, the councillors reaffirmed that Troll Ridge is a vital green lung that must be protected to prevent the coalescence of Troll and Comitro. To approve this today would be to ignore the council's own democratic resolution from earlier this month. During a public meeting in Troll on February the 18th, a senior member of Somerset Council Planning, Mr. Bill Cotton, stated that the Green Wedge Review can no longer be considered robust evidence. Despite this admission, he maintained the document will still be included in the process simply because it exists. This approach is logically flawed. Just as inaccurate or discredited evidence would be indismissible in a court of law, a planning document that lacks evidentiary weight should not play a role in shaping local policy. We recognise the tilted balance under the NPPF. However, the harms here are significant and demonstrable. The council's own landscape officer has objected, citing major moderate adverse impacts on public viewpoints. The site is a sponge for the local area. It is frequently waterlogged and saturated. Hard paving 6.69 hectares will inevitably increase the flood risk to existing neighbours, regardless of the proposed sustainable drainage systems. Our service is at breaking point. The College Way GP surgery is already over capacity by 3,000 patients. Troll and Castle schools are full. Adding 200 plus more residents without a joined up strategy for new facilities is not sustainable development. In conclusion, this application is premature, technically flawed, and violates the very policy this council just voted to uphold. We ask you to follow the lead of the policy subcommittee and protect our green wedge and refuse the application. Thank you.
Okay, the next person on my list is Councillor Dawn Johnson, please, who of course is one of the local members. You know the system, Dawn. Yeah.
I hope so. For those that don't know me, I'm Dawn Johnson. I'm the elected Somerset councillor, elected to represent residents of Comitro and Troll. Chair, councillors, I speak today on behalf of my community with deep concerns for its future. In just 6 days, 1,250 residents signed a petition to preserve the green wedge at Troll Ridge. That response shows just how strongly local people value this landscape and the passion that drives them to protect it. Your green wedge policy is not a technicality. It is a commitment to prevent the coalescence of Taunton Town and Troll Village and to protect the character and identity of both settlements. The recent Green Wedge review does not change that. Your own Planning and Transport Policy Subcommittee accepted the review was flawed and inconsistent and said they were not happy with the work undertaken. It therefore carries minimal material weight. This council's adopted Green Wedge policy remains in force. The applicant's claim that this is a sustainable site simply does not stand up to scrutiny. Proximity to schools and GP surgeries means nothing when those services are already over capacity. Troll Primary has had 100 applications for 34 places. Local nurseries and secondary schools are full. The GP surgery is overstretched. If new residents must rely on cars for basic services, this is not sustainable development. Still, contributions cannot build a fraction of a school or surgery. Flood risk is another serious concern. I've provided photographs of flooding in the fields and on Comitro Road, which is often impassable. The LLFA asked for an assessment, yet the applicant deferred this to reserve matters. We've already seen at Orchard Grove the additional costs incurred by developers of ignoring local knowledge, extra pumping stations, extra attenuation ponds because they had no understanding of the water levels. This council should insist on full flood assessments before any approval. Highways issues also remain unresolved. Previous decisions rightly prevented connections from Orchard Grove to this site due to traffic concerns. The consultation on Comitro Road's green lane status is still ongoing. And from judging from the mailbox I've received, a lot of people are not happy at that road being closed. It is premature to ask for SIL funds for a decision that has not yet been made. Finally, please do not be swayed by fears about the tilted balance. Case law confirms that Green Wedge policy is not overridden by it. Inspectors frequently find that loss of settlement separation and landscape harm outweigh the need for housing numbers. Councillors, your adopted Green Wedge policy is clear. Upholding it is the only defensible decision. Our communities expect you to protect the green spaces that already have policy protection. I urge you to refuse this application, not out of emotion, but because the facts, evidence and your own policies demand it.
Thank you very much, Dawn. The last individual on my list of speakers this morning is Jamie Roberts, please. Mr. Roberts? Sorry, I couldn't see you hiding at the back. You've heard me say it a number of times. When you're comfortable, push the right hand button, the red light comes on. When you're ready, your 3 minutes begins.
Good morning, Chair, Councillors. Today you have a clear recommendation from your professional officers to grant planning permission for up to 125 much needed new homes inside the settlement boundary of the most sustainable location within the core strategy area. At the forefront of your assessment today is the pressing need for new homes in Somerset. Here in Taunton, the council has a significant shortfall of 850 homes in its 5-year supply. More alarmingly, there are now a record 13,000 households on the housing register who are facing the real consequences of the housing crisis: high prices, insecurity and overcrowding. They would not describe their needs as generic. In this scheme, this offers 25% affordable housing, including homes at social rents, which will be transformational to the lives of their future occupants. Over 18 months, we have worked with your case officer and specialist consultees to agree a set of conditions and a multi-million-pound package of planning obligations and SIL funding to ensure that, one, good design is embedded into the scheme, including your placemaking principles as confirmed by the Quality Review Panel. 2, that the highways access and nearby junctions have capacity to accommodate the development. 3, that flood risk, nutrient neutrality and ecology are all properly addressed. And 4, that the infrastructure demands can be met on services like schools and healthcare. There are no upstanding objections from any of your consultees in respect of any of those matters. The Green Wedge designation will be an important part of your assessment. The Council's independent and professional Green Wedge review is a material consideration which concludes that the site does not strongly contribute towards any of the functions of the Green Wedge policy. We have heard today the concerns about coalescence with the rest of Taunton, but the reality is that coalescence has already occurred back in the late 1980s. Excuse me, the approved Orchard Grove
Excuse me,
development.
can we not interrupt the speakers, please? You were all given the courtesy of nobody interrupting you, so we're going to, I won't restart the clock, but we'll add on a good 10 seconds for that. Please do not interrupt.
Thank you, Chair. The approved Orchard development, Orchard Grove development to the west will reinforce this further still. Balanced against the loss of the Green Wedge are the substantial benefits of the scheme. New and improved cycle routes, as seen on the map earlier, green infrastructure and landscaping, the economic benefits from construction and occupation, and above all, 125 new homes in an eminently sustainable location to alleviate the housing crisis for real people in Somerset. Your officers have clearly set out their professional recommendation that the scheme accords with the development plan when read as a whole. Councillors, I urge you to approve this application today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Okay, that's the end of the public speakers. So I'm going to go back to the officers and ask them if there's anything they want to pick up on first before I come to the councillors and your opportunities to discuss it, committee. So,
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to remind members that the report to the Planning and Transport Policy Subcommittee did not change the policy in the adopted plan and CPA to the core strategy. The policy is still that set out in the adopted plan. That can only be changed through the local plan process. The Green Wedge Review study was undertaken to update the evidence base, and it's intended to apply across the whole of the council area to review the other designations in terms of green space across the council and the extent to which they need to be retained going forward in the new local plan. The focus of the study around Taunton and Wellington initially was because we had a number of proposals coming forward in those Green Wedge areas, and we wanted to understand to what extent the criteria set out in policy CP8 was still applicable and what weight could be attached to it. As a result of that study, the only green wedge that was found to no longer strongly meet the criteria was the Troll Green Wedge. As such, officers must take into account that up-to-date evidence in decision making. And that is why the officers are still giving the weight as set out in the report to the designation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, officers. Yep, Zach.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to make it clear that it's very clearly set out in the report that the proposed development would conflict with policy CP8 because that's been mentioned by a number of the speakers that it conflicts. We acknowledge that, and that's set out very clearly in the report. What we're saying is in the overall planning balance, the benefits of the scheme are not significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the harmful impacts. That's what we're saying. So at no stage have we said that CP8 is not applicable. In fact, it's clearly there in, if I could bring members' attention to page 33, 11.2.7. I just wanted to make that clear so that we're not, members aren't putting words into our mouths that weren't there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't really cover the Green Wedge issue and CPA, which you just heard about, but just in terms of picking up a couple of points. So the NHS and our school place planning colleagues and the external parties in terms of the NHS have not objected to the application. They've requested contributions which are to be secured through the legal agreement, which would mitigate the impact on school places and primary healthcare provision. Issues of overlooking and loss of privacy were raised. Reminder, this is an outline permission, so we don't know the location of the dwellings yet. Overlooking and loss of privacy will be dealt with at reserve matters stage. And drainage and flood risk, there's a requirement and a condition included to secure details of the full surface water drainage strategy, which will reduce the surface water runoff from this site. We had a comment about the detail should be provided now. Ultimately, at this point in time, we don't know the extent of the number of houses, their location, or the extent of hard servicing. So we can't have a detailed drainage design at this site. The condition that's included in the report will secure a drainage strategy that is compliant with policy when it comes in. I hope that's helpful. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. List of councillors that wish to speak. I'm going to start with Gul, who's the first to catch my eye, moving on to Habib and then Caro and then Nick O'Donnell, please. So, Will, when you're ready.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, actually, my apologies. I'm going to stop you before you start. My apologies. Councillor Mansell, no, I unfortunately, because you left the room, you can partake in the debate and you can ask questions, but you can't vote. So if you'd like to come back to your seat.
No, he can't participate in debate.
Okay. You can listen to the debate, but the lawyers tell me that you can't participate in the vote. Okay, so my apologies for that. Will.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to sort of dig in. No, that's not the right expression. Dig into the green wedge. No. So the green wedges should be retained and enhanced, and we've heard that they have clear policy protection. So the issue, I suppose, is whether that's been outweighed by other factors. And there is clearly an undercurrent that the green wedge here is not performing the functions it was originally intended to do. So I'm going to go through 11.2.4, which is on page 32, which says that a green wedge is a multifunctional area of land assisting towards a number of objectives, including protection of an area of landscape importance and visual amenity, prevention of coalescence of settlements, provision of a green lung for health and well-being of residents, and a valuable wildlife corridor. It then goes on in 11.2.5 to say that the green wedge is not an area of landscape importance, which begs the question why it's put in there in the first place. And what I'm looking at the list of the criteria for a green wedge, I'm just wondering if they all have to be present or whether they are just in combination an indication of a valuable area of land, which this clearly is. We've heard from all the comments. So there is no doubt that this application will effectively destroy the green wedge. It's going to take at least half of it. I think it's about 50% pretty much. And so there is clearly a view that its value is limited. I remember looking at one of the photographs, which from the Troll Road looking northwest, and I thought, wow, that looks as if you're looking across open country. And that to me, I think is part of the subjective test here. And I'm really pleased that this kind of application is still being considered by planning committees. Changes may mean that these things are taken away from us, but at least we do enable us to be people to be heard, and they enable us to make our own judgments in relation to how we interpret the plan. So I'm not convinced that the review of the green wedge is, and devaluing it, is that significant. I think the green wedge is what it is, and if you look at the map, it's slightly cut off at the western end, and I'd be very interested to know when those bungalows along, I think it's the Comey Road, were actually built. And so therefore, whether subsequent planning application, whether the green wedge met the criteria when it was made, and whether it's been gradually compromised over the last 10 or 15 years, I'd be quite interested to know. Because if we as a planning authority have allowed it to be degraded by, shall we say, ribbon development along the road and the big development at Comey Orchard Grove, that just effectively cut it off and left us with an island, I'm not sure. But nevertheless, the fact it is still there, I think it still performs a function. Going on to 11.2.8, it talks about, this is a separate point, the Troll neighbourhood plan. which clearly sets out a view that we should not have more than 30 dwellings. So this is contrary to the neighbourhood plan. However, it says that the plan has is out of date. And what I would like to know is whether it's out of date because it's 7 or 8 years old, or whether it's just been outdated because the NPPF has outmanoeuvred it. I'd quite like to know that, because I have been taken to task in the past for making comments about the effectiveness of neighbourhood plans. And if central government policy can completely outmanoeuvre them, does this mean, if it is the NPPF that's moved the goalpost, does this mean that every neighbourhood plan is now out of date in the district? That'd be quite an interesting thing, I think, for communities to know. And then there's the thing about the third point, is that the emerging local plan, and the word prematurity has been mentioned a couple of times. Now, I do know that in the emerging planning and infrastructure bill, and I will be corrected by officers who know this far better than I do, that the government is looking at the question of questions of prematurity. And I'd like to know whether, because we are looking at a plan, because we have a call for sites that is out, whether this application at this particular point could be regarded as premature or not. I would be very interested, because the green wedge is for the new plan, the call for sites is for the new plan is expected to be in place within 2 years. So should we really be trying to sort of mix and match between the two at this particular point? I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, well, on that very last point, of course, you will know that we have to determine the application that is in front of us, not an application we might wish was in front of us. So we have an application, and we are obliged to, within certain timescales, to determine that application. With regard to the other point, I don't know if Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. A couple of points to come back to. So in terms of the green wedge, I'll just remind members that the officer report doesn't give significant weight to the green wedge review, and it's clear that this proposal is contrary to CP8 and the desire to protect green wedges. But in making a decision, you have to have a view of the development plan when read as a whole, and that includes the policies which this proposal complies with. And they include the policies of the neighbourhood plan. And one of the neighbourhood plan policies was mentioned there in terms of developments of up to 30 houses will be supported. That policy doesn't say, and I suspect couldn't say in plan making terms, development of over 30 houses will be resisted or refused. In terms of prematurity, it's a very difficult area to refuse a planning application on prematurity. You need to be able to demonstrate that this scheme is so significant to the spatial strategy you're trying to deliver as to it would prejudice your ability to effectively make a plan. And 125 homes in a urban area already, I would suggest, doesn't meet that test of being so significant as it would adversely impact on our ability to make a plan. Hopefully that answers the question.
Just add to that, the new Somerset local plan is not yet at a sufficiently advanced stage that we can take into account anything that's coming through the plan. Obviously, we have been out for a call for sites. Those sites have not yet been fully assessed. We don't know which ones are going to go forward for further assessment. And indeed, we haven't agreed the spatial strategy and vision for the new local plan. So that is work that is underway, but we're not yet at a sufficiently advanced stage that we can take that into account.
To be honest, I was going to say exactly what Alison just said, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the next speaker on my list is Habib, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, I'd like to see on the screen the access points that the proposal is recommending. Then I'll take it from there onwards. On both Commitro Road as well as College Way. Yeah, that is the college way accessing into Wolves College. That is that I could hardly say this college way is not access. Yeah. Yep.
College Way on the left, Comitro Road on the right. Yes.
So basically, one of the biggest issue in Comitro is traffic and parking. It's the largest issue. We hear on a regular basis that, you know, this is the biggest issue here. And the other thing is actually going into Comitro Road. Currently, there is an ongoing consultation, and potentially the idea is to close this off. So are there any figures stating what percentage of the traffic will be utilizing Comitro Road and what percentage will be utilizing College Way? Without those figures, I don't see how we can actually go on and actually recommend one way or another, in my view. So that's one point that I was going to bring forward. The other thing is the statement made by Transport Planning Subcommittee was quite clear. They stated that on the 4th of February that they were not happy with the quality of work undertaken. So this is quite important. Now I'll actually go on with other issues. What is the point of designating land on a green wedge, protecting it for years, 11 years, as a part of a strategic plan, only to erode the protection when development pressure arises? Green wedges exist to prevent settlement coalescence, protect landscape character, provide a green lung for well-being, and maintain ecological connectivity. Those purposes have not changed. The land has not changed. What has changed is the pressure to build. And that is precisely when such protection matters most. The development plan requires these areas to be retained and enhanced, not gradually diminished through piecemeal decisions. Once openness is lost, it cannot realistically be recreated. This proposal, as I mentioned earlier, raises a second equally serious issue: access and highway impact based on assumption that may no longer reflect the real situation on the ground. And I say that because I've got the consultation in front of me. I can share it with members. The committee report confirms that the site sits between Troll and Comitro and would rely on the surrounding local road network, including Comitro Road and College Way corridor, for access. It's on the page on page 4. Members will know these are not a strategic distributor roads, but residential routes serving existing communities, school, pedestrians, cyclists, and public transport. Crucially, there are current, as I mentioned, consultation exploring pedestrianization or significant restriction of the traffic on Comitro Road. If such measure proceeds, even partially, the capacity and function of the local network would change fundamentally, in my view. This raises a key planning concern. The transport assessment underpinning this proposal cannot be considered robust if it does not reflect emerging traffic management proposals that could materially alter access arrangement and vehicle flows. In other words, the data risk being out of date before the decision is even made. Approving a major development based on traffic modeling that assumes unrestricted vehicle use off-road that may soon be restricted or pedestrianized and used as a priority routes would be premature and potentially unsound. Planning policy requires that development should only be permitted when safe and suitable access can be achieved for all uses where residential cumulative impact would not be severe. That judgment cannot be made properly while the future status of the key access corridors remains under active review. There's also fundamental contradictions. Land designation as a buffer between communities would not only be lost, but would generate additional traffic that could compromise emerging plan to create safer, lower traffic environment for existing residents. Planning is about foresight. It should not lock communities into outdated assumptions while policy and local transport priorities are evolving. So members, if you approve this development today based on yesterday's traffic conditions, who bears the consequences of tomorrow? For this reason, I'll urge you not to support the planning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next on my list is Carol Ellis, please. Carol.
Thank you. Can you bring back, put back up the slide about the benefits and harms?
Samuels, come on, highways policy. Yep, please. Okay, please do.
Hi there. So I think the first question was about the traffic flow distribution and how it's been spread from the proposed development. So the distribution is 41% going out the southern access and then 59% going out the northern access in the peak hours of 8 till 9 and 5 till 6. That equates to in the, I think it's the AM peak, that equates to 24 vehicles leaving the southern access and 35 vehicles leaving the northern access. And then there's a comment about capacity. They've undertaken 5 capacity assessments. All of them show the junctions do operate within theoretical capacity and therefore are not contrary to what the NPPF would consider severe. And then there was a few comments about sustainability or off-site works and pedestrian and cycle connections and the Cometro Road. So Cometro Road, basically the proposals of preventing vehicles going along there is to benefit local residents and future residents of the site, and it essentially falls in line with the adopted Connecting Our Garden Communities Route 6, which is to basically again make it an active travel area, reduce the number of vehicles going along there, and then reduce the severance between the existing Cometro area and the future or the permitted wider Orchard Grove development, which really focuses on getting future residents, say, for example, school children to the Orchard Grove Primary School, reducing that severance. And then also the applicants contributing £100,000 towards that. And then on top of that, there's a pedestrian cycle improvement from the northern access that will lead north to the existing cycle connection along College Way. It will lead north to the existing cycle facility off Pitts Close. And then that is again enhancing the Connecting Our Garden Communities Route 8, which is an adopted document.
Just to add to that, thank you, Sam. It's really helpful. I just want to remind members of what the NPPF says about transport impacts, and that they have to be severe if you're going to go down the route of refusing application on highways grounds. So it's a very high bar. And in this instance, with no objection from the Highway Authority, officers clearly believe that that bar has not been anywhere near reached. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carol, we now have the slide up. I think you were looking for, is that the right slide? Yeah.
Thank you. So as I understand it, what we're being asked to do is to weigh different things up, weigh the so-called benefits against the obvious harms, and this is a balancing act. I think it's unfortunate the report, and that the officer in the report keeps on going, does refer back to the discredited Green Wedge review. So not only, my understanding is, not only can that no longer be viewed as reliable evidence, it's a material consideration, the fact that that entire report was rejected by the Planning and Transport Committee a couple of weeks ago. So that shouldn't factor in this at all. It shouldn't be used to kind of cast aspersions on the value of the Troll Green Ridge, because basically this council has rejected that that analysis. It's my understanding. So if we're looking at the first harm, landscape, we're basically looking at, and when you showed the slide earlier of the map, you can see that's virtually half of the Troll Green Ridge would be lost, and as it's been pointed out, it would be lost forever. It ain't coming back. Once you have built on it, that is it. It is gone. Then that creates a precedent for the rest of that area, for the rest of the ridge, and not only that, it creates a precedent for all of our other green wedges. So there's a lot riding, seems to me, on this application. So that is acknowledged as a significant harm. I don't know if there's a word that's more sort of demonstrative than significant, because it's sort of humongous, isn't it? It's a humongous potential harm to lose a green wedge that ensures that there's effective separation of settlements, that protects the character of Taunton and Troll. And also, from my point of view, we're doing a bid for UK Town of Culture for Taunton, and the first thing is, what makes your town special? Well, what makes Taunton special is the fact that the countryside comes into the town. So if you're basically deleting that, you are fundamentally, I can completely understand why the Troll community is so deeply affected by this. But for Taunton as well, it changes irrevocably the character of Taunton. So again, this is like, seems to me a bit beyond even significant. Obviously, a benefit is having 25% affordable housing. So that's the one benefit that you can, I think, is absolutely, legitimate, and you have to weigh that against everything else. Where it's talking about pedestrian cycle highway infrastructure, it seems to me that the potential benefits are then outweighed by the wider impacts on the highway network. And yes, they may not be deemed in planning terms severe, but they will be significant. People always assume, oh, well, just because there is a cycle path or whatever, people will automatically get out on these bikes. No, they won't. Most of them will be getting in their cars. Most of them will be heading down very narrow lanes. As somebody else pointed out, that new access road could simply be used as a kind of a rat run. So, yeah, you might say, oh, well, they could deliver these enhancements, but there's going to be, on the other side of that, there's going to be a downside, isn't there? So that, to me, is cancelled out as a benefit, if that makes sense. Again, when it's talking about biodiversity net gain, moderate benefit or whatever, against that, we have to ask ourselves, will we still see deers running across those fields? Has that, I'm not satisfied that actually we'd be losing more than we're actually gaining. I'm not happy about that at all. Economic and financial as well. I mean, I just think I go back to the fact about what defines, why do people want to come and live in Taunton, or why would they want to settle in Troll? And it's a big chunk of that is having, access to all these great amenities, but feeling like you are not sort of hemmed in. You can walk along one street, turn the corner, open fields. You feel like you're just immediately in the countryside. That is a fundamental characteristic of what makes Taunton a great place to live, and that drives people to come and live here, and it drives inward investment. So it's an economic driver. So I wouldn't say, that again, the economic benefit of building houses against the damage that you're doing to Taunton and Troll as an attractive places to live and do business, I think that's cancelled out. So I'm left with the harm, which seems to me most significant in relation to the permanent loss, effectively. Well, it will be half of the green wedge, but effectively that is the green wedge. Finished. Goodbye. That seems to me to be humongous. And the character, the character of the area fundamentally, that seems to me to the harm I would describe as significant residential amenity, all the sort of amenity of if I'm like going along, if I'm going up to Troll to see Dawn in the Pant or whatever, I'm going along Honiton Road, I look out, I'm in the country, that's where I am. Or if I'm coming down Comitro Lane or whatever that one's called with the little gate, again, I look out and I have a countryside vista. I am in rural, you know, this is the essential nature. All of that gone. So again, that seems to me to be more than negligible. It seems to me to be pretty significant. So you can see where I'm heading with this. I'm weighing things up because I know we have to. There's no, we don't have just, we have the green wedge. We ought to be protecting it and enhancing it. That doesn't mean to say that no development would ever be possible on it. I completely understand that. If we're looking simply at weighing the things up, it seems to me to be the adverse impacts are way up here and the benefits are somewhere down here, right? That's the way I'm feeling about it at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring Zach Elwood in for a couple of clarification points.
Yeah, just very quickly, obviously, understand what the councillor's just said. And yes, at the end of the day, as the decision maker, the committee can apply the weight that they believe is appropriate to each of the benefits and harms. The table that's up there is just how officers have done it. I just want to clarify that if you're looking at weight that's above significant, you would normally use the term substantial, not humongous.
Okay, thank you for that. The next speaker, please, is Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think I'm really just going to reflect what Councillor Ellis has just said. What's the expression? No, first they came for the 50%, then they came for the rest. So it's going to be a loss of the green wedge, if completely. And I am struggling to see how we can proceed with this one, because whilst technically Troll Ridge is no longer connected to the countryside, the reason for it being a green wedge is still there. And that reason is to separate Troll from Taunton, so that the residents of Troll have a sense of belonging in Troll and not being subsumed or part of a larger town. So the reason for the green wedge, I believe, is still there. And I'm struggling to see how we can go against a decision that a council committee took 3 weeks ago to reject the review. That seems to be an inconsistency in the terms of the council. One committee says we reject the green wedge review and would not want to see development, and here we are seeking to agree to development. I just see that's an inconsistency, and I'm not sure how we can do that. I also question the economic benefit of this. We have 2,000 houses being built the other side of Dipford Lane. 125 houses, a drop in the ocean. Are we really going to cause significant substantive harm to a green wedge, to urban, to rural landscape, just for a drop in the ocean of housing? We have a lot of housing being built here in Taunton. I think this is just aggravation that is unnecessary and can be avoided. So I think that really, actually I was quite struck, since going off piece a bit, quite struck by an early comment about the green wedge becoming a green space. When I was reading this report over the weekend, I suddenly began to notice that there were no allotments in Comitro. There were allotments in Galmington, Troll and Wilton, but none in Comitro. And if you want a green space, allotment seems a good request from residents.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Alison?
Yeah, just picking up on the green space designation. At the time when this was designated as a green wedge, that local green space wasn't a national designation that could be made. As a result of the Planning and Transport Subcommittee's view on the evidence, we are going back to look to see whether or not a local green space designation would be more appropriate and would better meet the criteria. I think it's also important for members to recognise that if you don't accept the evidence that is in the Green Wedge review, then you're also putting at jeopardy the fact that the evidence strongly supports the other green wedges around Taunton. And it was for that reason that we did it, was to make sure that we had robust evidence to defend any proposals that were coming forward in relation to policy CP8. As we, Zach has already indicated, the weight that you give to that is for the decision maker, and the committee clearly here is the decision maker. But our view as officers is that it can only be given moderate or limited weight to be retained as a green wedge as a whole.
Thank you, Alison. Marcus.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was a very interesting report, this. Very interesting listening to speakers. I think I've learned a bit about planning from a few of you as well, so thank you for that. Yeah, reading the report for me was all about CP8 and the strength of the green wedge. And you look at, and I think Caroline's just done that, going through that, and we all like 25% affordable housing as much as the next person. I'd like a lot more elsewhere, all over the place. But I'm still struggling with the weight given to the benefits than the harm that comes forward. That said, it's been said, and I think one of the speakers talked about the tilted balance. I'd be interested to know about the tilted balance. I think one of them mentioned case law with regard to tilted balance, but the tilted balance, though, is all talking about the fact that we're not meeting our 5-year land supply. Yet we have the unusual situation of phosphates, which is probably the primary reason we're not meeting that land supply. And a consequence of that seems quite ironic that we could lose a green wedge that is still in force. It's not a policy that, although it was reviewed, it's still there. It is still applicable. And so it gets back to that balance that I think was being talked about earlier. And for me, the fact that this, once it's done and once it's built on, that's it. Regardless of what may or may not happen in the future, because we're looking at the application in front of us. And for me, that balance weighs down on the fact that that green wedge being protected, which is why it was set up in the first place. It was set up for a reason. I made some notes here about residential amenity. I'm not as convinced about the landscape arm as maybe others, but I am convinced about the neighbourhood amenity and the residential amenity. And I think you look at whether the green wedge does, it's a word everybody keeps using, stop them from joining together anyway, whatever that word is. Coalescence is the word I'm looking for. Well, I think it has done the job, because actually as someone who doesn't live in Taunton, you do still think that Trull, as much as I might joke that Trull's just a bit of Taunton, it does have its separate identity and it does have its separate character. And I feel that if we grant this application, we're then going against the whole point of that CP8. The whole point it was set up, and the whole point the green wedge was put in place for, was it 10 years ago? And what I would say is, although not, it was talked about, in the brief spell at Somerset Western Taunton, this green wedge was talked about a lot. It was always mentioned a lot. I don't know who by, I can't think about, but I knew of it. I've learned an awful lot more about it in the last 24 hours since I had the audacity to agree to sub on this committee and then print out the reports and start reading them. So I'm afraid for me, that for me is why I'm going to edge on against the application. I just can't balance, it's getting that weight about the it being against that CPA policy.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring Alison in about the questions you've raised because they're pertinent.
Thank you, Chair. The issue of phosphates is no longer holding up development in the Somerset area. We now have phosphate mitigation measures in place, which mean that there are sufficient credits and other measures available for mitigation to take place. The main reason why we're not meeting our 5-year housing land supply is because of the change in the standard methodology to the calculation of housing requirement and the 41% uplift that came in place, which meant that the former Taunton Deane area no longer had a 5-year housing land supply. Thank you, Chair.
was a question that was brought up about case law with tilted balance by one of the public speakers.
Yes,
And I'd love to know what that was.
if I remember correctly. Do we know? Do we know?
Well, I mean, the tilted balance is clearly set out in the NPPF, and I'm not aware of any case law that says it doesn't apply anywhere.
Okay. I'm going to deviate slightly from Caroline. Hang on.
I had a little Google earlier. I found a case. This is Chelmsford. I had to just copy and paste the article. I can't remember where it was even from. Urbanisation of Chelmsford Green Wedge is refused. This is 16th of January this year. An inspector dismissed an appeal against the refusal of permission for an affordable housing scheme on Chelmsford's Green Wedge. And it basically says, despite recognising the benefits of the affordable homes, the inspector found they were significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the harm to a designated green wedge and valued landscape on the outskirts of the city, various other, less important things. And it says the case demonstrates that planning decision makers may still exercise their judgment to refuse permission for schemes which are poorly designed or cause significant harm to designated areas, even against the backdrop of the national drive to speed up housing delivery.
Okay, thank you for that. Now I'm going to deviate from the norm, and I'm going to ask Caroline Warburton, was that the case you were thinking of, madam? Need a microphone, I'm afraid. Right hand button? Yeah, it's probably better to go to the public speaker. I wouldn't normally do this, but it's been raised. We've had a suggestion that it's one particular case. I just want to make sure we're talking about the right thing for the right reasons.
I haven't brought the details with me. It was the Supreme Court in Hopkins Homes, and I think that might have been Liverpool, and the High Court in Wavendon. And there were these instances where, because the tilted wedge had been applied, when it was initially based on the NPPF, they said pretty well nothing in the development plan still counts. And it was argued successfully on both these occasions that because the policies themselves were in tune with the NPPF, that they would still stand independently and they would weigh irrespective of the tilted balance. I can send the information to you, but I haven't got it with me.
Chair, I'd ask Councillor Ellis and Ms Warburton to email the planning officer with the details, the actual title, the proper title, proper references of those cases that you're quoting, so the planning officer can then pass that on to the applicant, because I think it's only fair that we actually have access to what you're reading out, because it's new information today. So if Caroline, if you could email the planning officer with the references of those two cases, I would be grateful, because I think that's only fair.
I can. I think they may be in one of my many objections that I've sent.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. And the same for Councillor Ellis, please.
Chair. Yeah, can I just be clear in terms of what Councillor Ellis was referring to? That was an appeal decision, not a court decision, not a High Court decision, and that was just that was an application of the planning benefits against the harms, which is exactly what you're going to be doing in this instance. You're weighing the benefits against the harms, and what we're saying is that as officers, we don't believe that the detrimental impacts, adverse impacts of the development significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme, as we've outlined in that table. But you're the decision maker, and it's for you to make that call as to where you draw that balance.
Thank you, Jack. And one of the key points, of course, is this 41% increase in the housing targets that the government have imposed on us. Okay, I've still got a couple of councillors who want to speak first, because we've consumed quite a lot of the morning, and I've got another application to hear this morning before we get to the lunch break. So Stephen Pugsley, please, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Land, they are not making any more of it. I've always had the view that land and landscape should be of supreme importance in our consideration. And in my view, there should not be a perceived equivalence. Landscape concerns should not simply be given the same fundamental weight as other factors. In my view, it is the most substantial issue that we need to consider. To quote the relevant areas of the report, 11.2.5, the green wedge does have local visual amenity value. 11.2.7, notwithstanding this, the proposal would still result in clear conflict with the objectives of policy CP8, and this must be considered and given weight in the decision-making process. 11.5.4, the Council's landscape officer has objected to the scheme for the same reason. The proposed development would be contrary to the objectives of policy CP8 of the core strategy. As Mr. Elwood has rightly pointed out this morning, really it is much to do with how we see the balance of factors, how we weigh them, and in our judgment, how we feel that they must fit. In my view, the landscape harm is substantial. And for that reason, I think because I don't think anybody else has done anything yet, I will move refusal of the application.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll seek a seconder to that in a moment. I've got a couple of councillors that haven't yet spoken, so I'm just going to pause on that, because what we will need to do, I feel the atmosphere in the room, I understand what's being said. I just want to make sure that the councillors have had their opportunities to make their points before we start looking for planning reasons to reject or approve this application. And I want to make sure everybody's had the opportunity to speak first. So on this first round, I've still got Norman that wants to speak. And then we're looking at our second round of people. Dave, I can't. You're not allowed to comment. No, the lawyers tell me I can't let you comment.
You should really be sitting over there. No, you can't. Oh, it's
okay.
No.
I'm bound by what the legal advice is currently, David, for which I apologise. But before we get to the second round, Norman hasn't had the opportunity to speak yet. So, Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Consistency and knowing the full arguments and the legality of various issues. Okay. Somebody lost their way. I think are very much to be defined in this issue if we are to take a finely balanced decision or a definite decision one way or the other. For instance, I wholeheartedly agree in many ways with what Stephen has just said. Habib has made comments about highways and the concern. Well, just recently, we have passed 2 planning applications, one at Cheddon, one at the top of Narrows, where we blocked a strategic relief road on active travel grounds and the latest highway policies that we have. Much more significant, perhaps, than this application. So in consistency point of view, I cannot see how we've got any grounds for a highways objection at this moment in time to this application. In terms of consistency, the Planning and Transportation Committee, I think was swayed by passion to a degree to throw the baby out with the bathwater when objecting to the whole lot, when we know that the government is looking at the possibility of building on Green Belt and Green Wedge, and therefore needed a technical review. They could have taken this section out of the others and said this one needs to be reviewed, but they took the view to wipe out the whole lot. I think that then makes the decision that they took possibly questionable, but that's by the by. The real problem I have here is a legal challenge has been brought up effectively by Caroline Warburton, saying that there is a precedent, and without that information, I can't see how we can decide one way or the other at this moment in time on this application. So from that point of view, I don't believe we can take a decision at the moment.
As we don't have the evidence of that
Yeah.
court case, which I think I'm right in saying goes back some years. I think that Hopkins case was 2017, I think. 22. Okay, I'm not quite sure either. I'm not quite sure either, and we don't have that. We don't have that to hand.
It's defining
and
that basically.
Norman,
Yeah.
in fairness to everybody, you know, I've got to look at what's in front of us. We've got to try and make our decisions on what is in front of us. Now, you know, we don't live in a perfect world, and very occasionally over the last 25 years, you and I have disagreed on something, but it is very rare. But right now, I'm afraid it's one of those occasions I don't actually agree with you. It's a conversation we can have at any time, as you well know, Norman.
Well,
in the interim, because we need to reach a decision, I'm just going to start the second round.
can you please, before you
Put
do
you
that,
on.
Mr. Chairman, define by what you mean by we have to reach a decision? This is coming before the planning committee that usually has an option to support, refuse or defer.
Or we can do any of those three things, Norman.
Well, without,
It is possible to
without
do
full
any of those three things.
information.
Right now, I don't have, I've got a proposer for a refusal. I haven't got a proposer for any of the other things. I don't have a second because I've not sought one for any of those things.
Well,
So at the moment, we are still free to make any one of those three decisions.
I'll propose that it's deferred then. in that
Well,
case.
thank you for that. If you wait a moment, we will need to, we will continue conducting this in an orderly fashion and reach a point where I will be looking for proposers and seconders for any of those three options. Okay? Okay. Yeah, please.
Just to clarify from a democratic procedure for everyone in the room, so we need to find, if that is the case, a seconder for this before we move to any other proposal.
From that point of view, we're going to have to make the proposals in the time-honoured manner, which we will do at an appropriate time. Make those decisions in the sequential test, as always. Okay, now this is the second round, and the first person that caught my eye was Gwyl.
Right,
Gwyl.
yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on that last point, so you'll seek a seconder for Stephen's proposal before Norman's. Okay, thank you. Right, okay. The green wedge, which is obviously at the heart of this in many, many ways, and it seems to be boiling down, certainly in terms of the report, to a discussion about the green wedge as a green wedge in isolation. But if you look at the map, of course, it's contiguous with the college playing fields. It's contiguous with the Comitro area, which is going to be cut off, but it's also linked pretty much to the land immediately to the east. So I think we should be looking at this in a combination, as its importance in combination with everything else, rather than taking a slice out of it and saying, well, that's just how it goes. So I'm veering towards Councillor Pugsley's point of view. I'm also interested in the traffic report, and again looking at the map, how it's going to work, routes into Taunton, in and out to and from the south. I do wonder whether highways have actually considered, and I mean the traffic numbers that were referred to earlier on seem very, very low. They're probably only derived from the people who are living in the 125 houses. But I haven't heard anything whether there's been any consideration of induced traffic by putting a new southern route into Taunton, or any diversion of traffic from alternative routes, because all roads lead to the hospital, and we all know people tend to go to the hospital quite a lot. So I'd like to hear a little bit more on that. And finally, on what Alison Blom-Cooper said was, I think I heard her say that by rejecting or supporting the rejection of the review, it automatically calls the status of every other green wedge into question. But I don't I don't actually, I can't understand why that would be. So I would like a little. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, but before we move on, I'm going to look at those options. Start with the green wedge and your comments about the review that took place. Alison.
I go back to what I said at the beginning, which was the Green Wedge review was undertaken initially in the Taunton Wellington area, but it's intended to undertake the evidence across the whole of the council area for the purposes of designated green spaces going forward in the new local plan. The fact that the Planning and Transport Policy Committee did not support the evidence and questioned the methodology and the way in which it's being counted, I think undermines to some extent the robustness of the evidence to support the findings that they made in relation to the other green wedge areas.
So can I come back on that specific point? I mean, it occurs to me that if you have something that you then get reviewed, and then you think, well, perhaps they haven't done a terribly good job in reviewing this. The something is still there; its integrity is still there. It hasn't necessarily been undermined. So the impact of the review should be nothing more than neutral, I would have thought, in terms of where we are in our policies. Anyway, sorry. I'm looking forward to the answers to the other 2 points.
Will remind me of the further 2 points.
Beg your pardon. Looking at it in combination with the playing fields and the land immediately to the east, and also the question about induced traffic or diverted traffic onto this new spine road, which I don't think has been covered.
I'll defer to our transport expert on the highways matter. The in combination, we are certainly going back to, as I said, to re-look at whether or not that the trial green wedge should be more appropriately designated going forward as a local green space, and that's obviously something that the neighbourhood plan could take forward ahead of the local plan as well.
So in terms of, so my understanding of your question is the closure of Commentary Road to motorised vehicles, that redistributed traffic then coming onto the proposed spine road. So the capacity assessments themselves didn't fully include that redistribution. They only included their trip generation of their site. And that's purely because, to be honest, that was a scheme that we have been pushing to support active travel as part of the planning negotiations. But if they were to update their capacity assessments based on the number of vehicles using Commentry Road, which is very low because it is a track, I anticipate that the capacity assessments will still be well within theoretical capacity. So it still wouldn't have a severe impact because the number of vehicles using Commentry Road in the AM and PM peak. So AM peak, I've got worst case 72 vehicles route along there. That's including some of the houses at the southern end. Yeah, in the AM peak hour. So then if you throw on top the proposed development traffic of, I think earlier I said on the southern access, 24 vehicles coming on. So you're getting towards 100 vehicles using going the Dipford Road, Commentry Road junction. Again, that isn't enough in capacity modelling. That won't be severe. That won't have it's ultimately in terms of the MPPF. It wouldn't be severe if we went to if this went to a planning appeal. It wouldn't stand up.
Okay, thanks. And you don't think it would draw traffic from the Honiton Troll Road line?
It shouldn't, because ultimately, ultimately, the Honiton Road is a much better classification of road, is much wider, whereas Dipford Road is going to be narrow. I should add further to the west after the Commentry Road junction, as part of the permitted wider Commentry Orchard Road development, that's going to be stopped up as well. That's the anticipation, the plans for that to be closed, basically, so all the Commentry development sticks on the spine road that goes up to the A38 or down to Honiton Road. So it will still be mainly Honiton Road should be the route that everyone will go, because that even that small section of Dipford Road isn't really that conducive for you to want to cut through.
Okay, thank you. If you want to come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The road mentioned, Commitro Road, is just a few yards away from where I live. So I experience the traffic on a regular basis. Those numbers, I've seen traffic coming to halt on a number of occasions. It's a single narrow lane. So 70 per hour, sometimes if you have traffic coming from both ways, it just makes it impossible to access. I think, Sam, you mentioned the numbers, 24 vehicles from the southern side and 34 from the northern side. I looked up again at some of the numbers by tricks, which I think you actually refer to. Is that right? That is trip rate information with the the computer system. And to my surprise, they actually looking at about 4.231 movement per household, and that is morning as well as evening. So I don't know whether you've actually mentioned that as a AM or PM or combined the two. Now that makes more sense to me because I look at myself with my family. My wife takes our young ones to school, one trip, bring back another trip, then go and pick them up on another trip. And so that actually makes sense to me. And to say that, the traffic modeling is based on 1/10 of that doesn't make sense because I see it not just for myself, I see it for my neighbors as well. So just a clarification on that. I just wanted to put that across that thing. Thank you very much.
Get Sam to clarify that for you, Sam.
Yeah, so in transport planning and traffic modelling, we look at the AM and PM peak hours, not really so much the whole day, because that's how the models are set up, the industry standard modelling. So you look at the AM peak and PM peak because they are the worst case. But yeah, the 4 trips per dwelling sounds about right for vehicle trips. I think that sounds about right. But yeah, in terms of the capacity assessments, you put in the numbers for the AM and PM peak hours, which again aren't showing them to be severe.
Okay, thank you. Right, we're at a situation now where we've, if at all possible, we are obliged to make a decision on the application that is in front of us. Now, the first suggestion about a decision has come from Stephen Pugsley. I'm assuming that we're going to be looking at planning reasons around CP8, the loss of the green wedge, and I also picked up on the traffic because there was this question of that consultation in the Commission Lane. If that's going to be closed, then that knocks that whole access out of the frame. So I'm looking in those terms. We need planning reasons. We need planning reasons to do this. So, sorry, if you've got an officer that wants to come in.
It's just a point of clarification. So if motorised vehicles, basically initially it's bollards that would be put on Commentary Road.
Yes.
That doesn't stop the southern access coming forward. It's just
a bollard on the road.
No. So it would be like further up Commentary Road. If Paul, you've got a map or.
Okay, let's look at this on the map. Make sure I understand it because I'm not quite sure I understand how you can negotiate a bollard with a car.
So
okay.
Paul, if you move can you see Paul's cursor on the screen? That's where, for this initial trial, that's where the bollards are going. So that's southern access being. Yeah, exactly. I know that, but we're discussing what would happen if it becomes permanent, which is what the applicant's offering to contribute £100,000 towards. So that's where the bollards would be, which means that you would still be able to access, see the gold star right at the bottom. That's where the access is. So you'd just come in off Dipford Road, Honiton Road direction to get to it.
Chair, do you mind if I just add that obviously, you know, I sense the mood in the room. But in terms, as per the recent member training, in terms of making defensible decisions, you have to look at each individual reason for refusal and whether that's defensible. My argument to you would be that we've had strong evidence to say that the impact on highway safety and transport would not be severe from transport experts. I've heard maybe 2 members mentioning concerns about transport. I don't even believe Councillor Pugsley was proposing refusal on those grounds. I think he was proposing refusal purely on the balance and the landscape harm, unless I'm reading that incorrectly. So I think it would be useful to get a clarification from Councillor Pugsley as to what his proposed refusal would broadly be.
I agree. I hadn't got to that part.
I was going to say, and Mr. Elwood is absolutely right. I understand the points that are being made about the highways considerations. However, I am mindful of the comments of our experienced highways officers in this matter, and I think it would be a dangerous ground for us to include that as part of any refusal. I think we are much more secure on putting forward the landscape harm through the erosion of the green wedge being substantial and outweighing the other benefits of the proposal as being our strongest ground for refusal, I think.
Okay, thank you for that. So before I look for a seconder for your proposal, Stephen, I'm going to just see if there are any other reasons that members of the committee are thinking of in terms of a refusal, having had the discussion about highways. And I want to see if there are any other areas which you think we might be able to refuse. Sonia. I think if we could put the balance sheet back up again, because that will help us to concentrate the thinking. So here's the balance sheet again. And Cool, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I'm conscious on page 14, I think it's page 14, 2.4, in the one of the reasons for recommendation of approval, it says 2.4, while the development plan would conflict with a limited number of development plan policies. So there's presumably more than there's clearly that CP8 is being conflicted with. But I would like just to understand where the other ones are, please.
Well, we'll just go back to Paul Sherman then. Paul? Or Zach? Sorry.
I'll take it.
Yeah,
I think,
fine, Zach.
I think the other one we would identify is DM1 of the same Taunton Deane core strategy, which talks about the needs for development to protect the character of an area. So I think it would be CP8 and DM1 if you were going to go down that route. They are complementary.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, Stephen, but I think we are looking at a refusal on the basis of CP8 and DM1. Now, I don't know whether you think there are any others or there's any other reason before we get into a point where we make a revocable decision. I want to make sure everybody is happy, or at least as happy as you can be. So I've just, Zach.
You want to read it? Yeah. Chair, so we've been following the debates and listening to members intently, and have taken the liberty, whilst members have been talking, to look at putting together what could potentially be a defensible refusal reason based on Councillor Pugsley's proposal. Can I read it out? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yep. So,
Save us a lot of time.
okay, so it's one reason for refusal, but it encompasses what we believe you've mentioned. So that the development proposed would result in the introduction of a large urban housing development into an area of open agricultural land, which currently positively contributes to the character and appearance of the local area, and also provides an important area of separation between Taunton and the village of Trull. The development proposed would cause substantial, and that was the word I think Councillor Pugsley used, substantial harm to the local landscape, in particular when viewed from the public rights of way adjoining and within the site, from Cometrow Road and from Honiton Road. The development would result in visual and physical coalescence between Taunton and Trull, and would be harmful to the setting of Trull as a rural village, which is currently distinct from the wider urban area. For these reasons, the proposal would conflict with the requirements of policies CP8 and DM1 of the Taunton Deane Core Strategy and paragraphs 135 and 187 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Crucially, the adverse impacts arising from the proposed development would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme. Thank you.
I'm very happy with that narrative, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, which expands on my original wording.
It's very useful to have the MPPF numbers as well, because it brings us to the core of the whole point. Okay, Quill, you want to say something?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think it's a very good argument for refusal. I mean, one of the things that slightly struck me was the emphasis on being able to see it, rather than its intrinsic value in the fact that you just know it's there. Because if there are limited views, which I think has been demonstrated, I don't think that in itself undermines the value of the green wedge as something that people know is there and they value. It's just behind the hedge. The fact you can't see it doesn't. And I was slightly, I mean, I don't know whether.
I think we got it all, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, my apologies. I think we are now at the point where we're going to go to the vote, and the vote is to refuse this application for the reasons given. Basically CP8 DM1 and paras 135 and 187 in the MPPF. And so I'd like to see those in favour of that, please. Yep, that's unanimous. That's a unanimous vote. Okay, before we cease, I would like to pay tribute to the members of the public, with one minor exception. We've all been very well behaved this morning, and I thank you for that. I'd particularly like to thank Dawn Johnson, who I know has worked her socks off to get to this application here and to be heard. We're going to take a 5-minute comfort break now. Okay. Okay, 5-minute comfort break, and then we're on to item 5 in our agenda. Erection of up to 25 dwellings at land at Greenway Farm, North Street, Wiveliscombe, Taunton TA42UA. And the case officer is Joe Lardley, but I believe Paul, you're presenting today. Is that correct?
That's right. Thank you.
Okay,
Chairman.
well, in that case, welcome, and we look forward to some presentation.
So, the again, a bit of a delay on my laptop, but the application is for an outline application for the erection of 25 homes. That is the application site that you see there outlined in red, north of Wibliscombe on the edge of the settlement boundary. That is an aerial view of the site with the red line application site superimposed on the aerial view. You can see there's the site is adjoined by housing to the south and to the east. As it is an outline application with only access to be considered, this is an indicative plan of how the site could be developed to show how 25 dwellings could be provided on site and accessed. Access to the north of the existing field access and access track. Takes it through some photos. That is a view looking north along North Street. The application site is on your right and the existing homes on the left. That is a view looking the opposite direction, looking south. A further view looking out of the village. The application site is on your left, and the edge of the application site stops where that large evergreen tree is. Another view of the application site from North Street. That's the existing track within the site, and showing some of those trees which kind of mark the boundary between the two existing fields. They're generally to be retained. That is a view of the southern section of the site looking across and down towards the houses in the village. That's the other field that comprises the application site, again looking down towards the houses. You'll note there is a bit of a level change between the application site, the street, and the houses opposite. And a similar view, that conifer that you can see again marks the corner of, roughly marks the corner of the application site. And that far corner is where the attenuation basin is proposed for the SUDs. Included this slide because it shows the land uses proposed. The purpley shaded areas, the area for the houses. The application site also does include the green area, which is for biodiversity land, and there's no houses proposed for that area. And if I take you back to the aerial photograph, so excluding the area that we just saw for biodiversity, this application will essentially follow the depth of development on the west side of North Street and front on to the existing development on the edge of the village. So key considerations for this application: site is outside the settlement boundary, and there is some conflict with policy DM2. However, due to the council's housing land supply, tilted balance applies. Up to 25 homes are to be proposed, with an in excess of our policy requirement of 25% affordable housing. The applicant's proposing 28%, and also includes a LEAP. There is some landscape harm, but this is localised and can be further mitigated through planting and detailed design, which will be secured at reserve matters stage. Our colleagues in highways, drainage, ecology and phosphate all raised no objections to the proposal, subject to conditions or Section 106 obligations, and these are set out in your committee papers. Proposal will provide affordable housing units, play space, market housing, biodiversity net gain and local economic benefits. And accordingly, officers consider that the benefits outweigh the harm that would be caused, and therefore the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. I just want to pick up on a point just for generalisation, really. I know there's been some consideration about the Section 106 and SIL and considerations. They are site specific. What the SIL can be spent more or less in any part of the area, the community infrastructure levy, but the 106 agreements tend to be site specific. Whilst I understand arguments that I've heard about altering where we spend 106 monies from particular sites. I can see why that might be desirable, but it's just not possible for us to do that. Is that, can one of the planning officers confirm that for me, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so that's correct. The section 106 will list what the money is to be spent on. So it will generally specify it. Again, in general terms, if it was to provide a play area or contribution to a play area, it would be within a specified distance of that development.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to go to the public speakers. I've only got one registered speaker, and that's Mr. Neil Gillings, who is the for the applicant. Mr. Gillings, you will know the form by now. Come to the desk, sit yourself down, get comfortable, push the right-hand button and the red light comes on. And when you start speaking, your 3 minutes begin, sir. And welcome to my committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, committee members, members of the public that were here, and officers. I speak on behalf of Summerfield Homes as applicant. I will be brief, but speak in support of this proposal. Your officer's report recommends approval subject to conditions and planning obligations. I commend it to you, fairly obviously. It notes that no statutory consultee has objected to the proposal subject to conditions and obligations. As you know, the presumption in favour of sustainable development is engaged. The clear conclusion of the report is that the benefits of the proposal outweigh any harm. In terms of operation of the presumption, the adverse impacts do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the application proposal. National planning policy guides you to grant planning permission. Whilst policy, of course, guiding you as decision makers is of prime importance, there are real life consequences of not allowing proposals such as this one. The housing requirement is not an academic figure that is something inconvenient for society to provide. It clearly relates to what is generally understood as the housing crisis. This housing crisis possibly doesn't affect many people individually in this committee room, but I know it affects many people that we all know, especially younger generations. I have 4 grown-up children, all of whom will have or are having a much harder job in accessing a suitable and affordable home than I did when I was their age. It is our generation's duty to provide for generations to follow in many ways. Certainly, I would argue, for such a basic as adequate housing. References to enough housing already being provided in the town or the county. I've said spurious, but I don't want to annoy people, but spurious and factually incorrect. Simply put, we as a nation are not building enough houses. We, you, all of us need to do more. Whilst this is a small scheme for up to 25 dwellings, it makes a small and necessary step towards providing homes for people in Wiveliscombe and Somerset, whilst also improving the council's land supply position. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I'll only make one comment. In this country currently, I understand there are 1.6 million planning permissions live that aren't being built out. If developers as a whole started to build out the rates they have, then we wouldn't have anything like the crisis we have. Thank you. Committee, it's down to us now. It's our turn. Dave Mansell.
Okay, thank you. I must correct a couple of things. So, we don't want to offend anybody. Wiveliscombe is a town, so let's note that. it was also said that no statutory consultee has objected. Perhaps I'm wrong, but I understood Wivelscombe Town Council was a statutory consultee. Okay, they're not. All right, well, just to let you know that Wivelscombe Town Council, who are not a statutory consultee, but are always consulted, they did register objection, as did many others. So I think, you know, we do need to note that. Okay, let's. I've got a few comments. I'll start with that. Actually, a very simple question, and I'm genuinely checking on this. We saw from the photos earlier that people park along North Street, and they have no parking in their houses there. So, and this is an issue throughout the whole of the town. Can I check that this application has no impact on the ability to park alongside North Street, where, as shown in the photos, people park at the moment, especially between Greenway Farm and the Northgate turning? So that's the question. Now, in terms of comments on this, it's been noted that this site is outside the settlement boundary. It's also, and as part of that, this is a proposal to build on the gap that currently exists between Wivelscombe and Langley Marsh, and that gap is narrow, and there are other applications currently live before the council related to that gap. So this would contribute to closing that. Now, absolutely take the comments on the need for housing, and Wivelscombe is not a place that is unhappy to have development and knows that it needs to thrive. I'll say a little bit more on that in a moment. Where applications have been approved outside the settlement boundary before, and the examples being Tucker's Meadow and Allenslade Close, which are close to this site, they have been exception sites. So they have really looked to address the need for housing in the area and have been entirely connected to local need. So if the concern is to provide housing for local need, this should be an exception site and be entirely for local need. So not beyond, and I believe that's an important point. There is a landscape impact here that is that is mentioned in the report, and Wivelscombe is a hill town and surrounded by hills. This is at the bottom of one of the biggest hills. It just stretches up and up, goes up to Morndown, and it's high. And this is towards the bottom, not quite at the bottom, but nearly at the bottom. So it's sloping and it still can be steep. On the other side, the developments are called Plain Pond and Langley Marsh. And I think there's a reason for those names. A lot of water comes down off that very big hill. And we do get regular flooding incidents at the bottom. They vary, you know. It's a little bit like putting a finger in a dike. You try and deal with one issue, and then it emerges somewhere else the next year, and that's what happens. Now, the proposal is that surface water drains are going to be used. Now, as a local ward member, I am painfully aware that those surface water drains down from the site are really fragile. Some of them are very old, and they keep popping up with problems. Now, it is proposed that there will be further investigation there. That will be absolutely vital, and I'm certain that when that further investigation is done, they will find quite a challenging set of drains alongside. I mean, they're drains, they're culverts, open ditches, pipes, all sorts of things, and several and water courses going along several routes there as will be found from diverting them. I'm afraid I've had to investigate them often with residents when the flooding that from those water courses comes out somewhere, and it increasingly is in the housing that's at the bottom. Okay, now I think probably related to the section 106, we've got the travel plan, and this is a little bit of a bugbear with all of mine. I look at these travel plans, in nearly all cases, I think, is anything going to result from that? Money's being spent on it, but we're not going to see much benefit that actually results. The biggest thing from this one is that broadband will be provided, which is a problem in the town, but that's a standard. You know, for these days, that's not an additional extra. That is absolutely a basic thing that should be provided. I also wish to comment in connection with the section 106 and as a play area here. Recent developments going back a number of years now, so over the last 10 years or so, we're talking about all of the new estates we've got have got problems with their management arrangements for the play areas. Literally all of them, and another one going back 30 years or so, it's still not adopted. I think this is a general issue for the council. I'm going to raise it as a specific one here. The way the management company arrangements are working out for play areas and other assets like attenuation ponds, it's not working. It needs to be better, and the council needs to pay attention to this, but of course so do the developers as well. What's coming out is not good enough. And we're seeing that in literally all of the developments we've had over a number of years now in Wiveliscombe. All of them, it's not working. And essentially there's standoffs between the residents and the developers. And it's not good for anybody, not the developers either. So you would hope the developers would come up with better arrangements for management of these assets as well. It's in their interests. Now, we've talked about share of housing, that's been mentioned, and the need for it. I'd like to refer to the Site Allocation Development Management Plan 2016, but which takes allocations to 2028, still in the future. Now, for Wiveliscombe, which is identified as a major rural centre, that plan says that Wivy has allocations of up to 200 new additional dwellings. We are well over that. We've had our share, and there's still more coming. So it's Stile Road, we've had 2 phases, 52 houses. Sandys Moor, which was not an allocation, has been outside the local plan, 94 houses. That's 146. We've got 71 currently under construction at Burgess Lane. That takes us to whatever it takes to getting up to 220. We've had quite a lot of infill, some fairly significant. And we've still got more applications pending, including one for 100 houses at Sandys Moor on the other side of town. So, you know, Wiveliscombe is taking its share of new housing, and any suggestion that it's not is demonstrably wrong. We're taking our share. Now, what we're not getting our share of is our infrastructure being improved. So we're not getting investment in the infrastructure in town. And the biggest thing we're seeing is that all the new houses that are done, you can visibly see the numbers of cars going up in the area and parked on street. And we've not got enough space for all of this, which is why parking is such a big issue and why I asked the first question, because every time parking gets displaced, it causes knock-on problems elsewhere. And from this one, this development is badly located from a development point of view, I would practically say on the wrong side of town. Because if you want to go anywhere, you have to drive through the town centre. So if you want to go to Minehead, Taunton, Wellington, you've got to go through the town centre. And that town centre was never built for cars. It was horse and carts. You know, it's been there a long time. It was a market at one time. There's narrow roads and there's congestion there, and it causes problems. It causes problems to people crossing in the town centre, and it causes problems to people just parking all over the place, and anyone who comes to Wivy will see that. And absolutely, you know, those who live there, we can just see the numbers of cars increasing and causing more and more problems throughout the town. And this never gets addressed in new development. It seems to be think we can just keep absorbing it. Well, we can't. I would say if this development goes ahead, it needs a contribution to the town centre for improvement. As a very modest contribution, I would suggest £25,000 could make a difference, and there has been talk about what could be done with that sort of sum. I looked at the last application before, and I couldn't believe the list of contributions that were having to be made in Trull. Never seen anything like that in this application or other ones. Now, infrastructure in Wivelscombe matters and needs addressing too. I would say there needs to be a contribution made. Okay, I think I've come to the end for the moment. I hope that was helpful.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the comments about you made about parking on the site, my understanding, I'll check with the case officer, but my understanding is that the application does have does meet the Somerset standard for car parking within a development. I'll just check that that's correct.
Yeah, that's right, Chairman. So the site itself provides off-street parking for the occupants of the new development, and the scheme doesn't propose any parking restrictions along the existing road at the front of the site. Vehicles will just have to still park in a safe way as they do at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I've got Andy Sully online. I don't want to miss him. So, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, if I may. Under ecology, page 72, it talks about point 6 is the biodiversity net gain. Just gives a bit of a preamble. I was the officer did show on his slides an area that they're going to keep some land back for biodiversity net gain. I thought as a council we weren't doing on-site mitigation. It had to be off-site because the council couldn't in future police it. Can I just get a bit of clarity on that, please? Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So biodiversity net gain can be a combination of on and off site. In this instance, they've got an area on their site they're using to deliver the BNG that they need to make their development acceptable.
So we can still do on-site mitigation. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Quill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to echo Councillor Mansell's comments, particularly about the issues of overdevelopment in Wivelscombe as a whole, and so therefore a development that's outside the village boundary is particularly unwelcome, specifically on the north side of town, which has been pointed out. The only access to and from, you can either go down Northgate, which is subject to increasing development along there and really difficult, or through the centre of town, which again is even worse. So I think from a traffic point of view, this probably hasn't been thought through very well. I think that's more or less all I wanted to say. I think as I say, from a policy point of view, it's an unallocated site. If it comes forward as an exception, then that might change my view a little bit. But on balance, I can't see affordable housing. That's a good thing to get. Children's play area. I think Wivey is reasonably well served for children's play area anyway. Ecology and biodiversity, well, you know, you're ripping something up and trying to put it back together again. So it's, from my perspective, it's difficult to see that there's any obvious benefit there. Phosphate mitigation is standard wherever you go. Payment of monitoring fees for the BNG and the phosphates, well, they're as they are. And highways, I mean, if you're just looking at pedestrian and cycle improvements, yes, they're clearly going to be welcome, but you're knowing that road as I do, it's relatively limited in scope. And the fact is that people who live there are still going to have to leave Wivelscombe. There is a bus service down to Langley Marsh, but I don't think it's that frequent, certainly not enough to benefit commuters. So you're going to get people leaving and coming back to there through the middle of town or up Northgate. And I don't think it's a particularly good site as Wivelscombe goes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nick.
So just reading through the report, I noticed that policy DM2 is being conflicted with and policy CP8. Now, CP8, they were saying there's about tilted balance, but I noticed from Wiveliscombe Town Council that they're saying that they've got more development going on that they've had. But actually, in terms of their own town, I think it was the town council. No, sorry, mine doesn't scroll very fast, and I'm going to scroll back down. So they've said they've seen a significant amount of development. So actually, they've whilst we have this tilted balance of 3.95, lack of land supply because it's only 3.95, they're saying that they've this isn't a case in their area, that they've had more development. Oh, sorry, it's taking a long time to scroll down. Oh, I can't remember which page number it was either. Page 66. 66. I can go to 66 on the report. Yes, has objected because the site is outside. There is already adequate land supply allocated in Wiveliscombe, so they feel they've already got more than 5 years land supply over there. So I'm wondering if they are being overdeveloped. That's one thing. And then on section 12, you know the page number for that one. Section 12. That might just help me there. Scroll down. There's 12.1.2.
To page
83. Thank you very much, Stephen. So yes, so we are going outside policy DM2, which seeks to strictly limit residential development in the open countryside to specific exceptions. The proposed scheme does not fall within these exceptions and therefore represents a departure. So I was wondering if we can have some clarification of what are some clarification on that little section there.
Sure, I'll ask the officers for that, but of course, unfortunately, we can't avoid the 41% uplift that the government has imposed upon us, and we are without the tilted balance applies because we only have a 3.95%, 3.95 supply of housing land, and that I'm afraid does change the game, and the government have just put us in a position where we've got to find another X thousand houses at the drop of the proverbial hat, which is not comfortable. So I'll bring the officers.
So yeah, the clarification how we can square up with not.
I will just
going over.
I'll just bring the officers in on the other points.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, you've actually stolen my thunder a little bit in saying that, but yeah, you're quite right. So any reference to locally calculated need would be out of date now because of the uplift, the 41% in any case. But we don't look at 5-year land supply on a town by town, parish by parish, ward by ward basis. We would look at it in terms of the former Taunton Deane area, which is 3.95 years. So the tilted balance does apply. I mean, this is very similar a case to the last application you dealt with at Trull, whereby we're saying that the housing, so it's not just the affordable housing that needs to be given weight, it's the market housing as well that needs to be given weight. And we'd say that's significant weight because it's delivering market housing where we're woefully under the 5-year land supply. And then it comes into this planning balance again and again. You're the decision maker and you can do that planning balance. We're saying that in this instance, there are limited harms. And yes, there is a policy conflict, which you quite rightly pointed out in terms of DM2. But in terms of the overall planning balance, we're saying that the benefits from this are not that. So the adverse impacts that we can identify, which are few and far between, do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. It's not just enough to say there are harms, they have to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And where we've not got a 5-year land supply, and this is a scheme that is more than policy compliant in terms of its provision of affordable housing. Yes, there is a conflict with the DM2, we've acknowledged that. but we're saying that when you apply the tilted balance and you go into the overall planning balance, from an officer's point of view, we believe that the recommendation is the correct one to grant, but I appreciate that you're the decision makers, not us.
Yes, I suppose I was just concerned that we were setting a precedent by a departure from current policies that are in place.
Can I just come in again? Sorry, it's not a precedent because we're required to apply the tilted balance where it's applicable. Sorry, that's not a very good way of putting it, but we're required to. So it's not a precedent. But in any case, in each instance, you're doing the same exercise. You're balancing the benefits against the adverse impacts, like you did at Trollridge, and members came to a reasonable conclusion that in that instance, members felt that the adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the harms. We don't see those harms here, other than in terms of policy, non-conflict with policy, and it has been subject to a landscape assessment, which said that the landscape harm would be limited. So that's all I'd want to point out.
On this question of the tilted balance and the uplifts that the government has forced upon us, as Zach says, it's across the Somerset West. It's across the whole of Somerset. My apologies, the whole of Somerset. And yes, there are some towns and villages in Somerset that an additional 10, 20, 50, 100 houses could easily be accommodated, and there are some towns and villages where actually it really would be very difficult to accommodate them, and that's the problem. It's not done in an equal manner. It's a blanket. Somerset will have an increase of 41% from where we thought we were, and it was a difficult enough equation with the previous numbers. You had 50% of that, or 41%, so I don't want to over-egg the pudding. But you had 41% of that, and it makes it really, really hard. And there are going to be difficult decisions over the next 3 or 4 years, I'm afraid. David, do you want to come back? Do you mind if I let Gwyl back first? Yeah, Gwyl?
Yeah. The other thing is that if you look at 12.7 drainage and flood risk, we're playing blind here. There's an awful lot that they don't know. There's apparently a culvert there, but nobody knows where it goes. And so they support discharge to the Wessex Water Surface Water Sewer, subject to agreement. Now, I don't know, frankly, how big that sewer is, and whether Wessex will be happy for them to discharge into it. And I would really like to know, and I suspect I know the answer, whether we can reject this and say that the outline has to come back with a full drainage strategy before we'll consider it. I'm not sure that's within our gift, but I mean, otherwise, if this was to pass, then I know from my own village, which is only a few miles away, we get a lot of water in a very short period of time, and it runs off those hills like there's nobody's business. And the introduction of paving and roofs into this area is only going to exacerbate downstream problems, because it all runs downstream towards the town centre. So I think the whole drainage thing is really underpowered on this.
Okay, well, thank you for the comment. I mean, I'll point out at 12.7.2, the proposed strategy includes an attenuation basin and underground tank designed for the 1 in 100-year storm, plus 45% climate change allowance, with discharge restricted to greenfield rates. And I'm not seeing anything from Wessex Water that they have a problem with this. So I haven't got a statutory consultee or one of our statutory experts telling me that they are concerned about this. Officers can tell me if they think I'm wrong.
No, we think you're right. I'd also point out that we've got condition 18, which requires that no development shall commence until details of the sustainable surface water drainage scheme has been submitted, and that will include details of the actual design of the drainage system. So whilst I understand the concerns of the that raised by the member. This is in the lowest flood zone. It's a flood zone 1, lowest risk, and as you say, Chair, you've pointed out that they're looking at a 1 in 100 event plus 45% climate change, which is in accordance with the current requirements. So, whilst yes, it would be in your gift to refuse permission on drainage grounds, we strongly advise that you don't, because we don't have the evidence to back up a refusal on those grounds. So, thank you.
Okay, Dave, you want to come back?
Please, thank you. I will briefly comment on the point just raised, and I think clear from what I said earlier that yes, the flooding aspects of this, the surface water, does feel underpowered in what we've got here, especially when you know you have some understanding of the site. I do know where the culvert goes, whether there's any point in explaining when I remember all the details now, but I've seen in particular the maps which highways have showing where it goes, and they have to look after the entry into it to stop it getting blocked, and it has caused problems further on. It has you know, there has been flooding instances from where it goes on to after that culvert, okay, so it needs attention. There's some requirement for that in the condition, but it is a serious issue, and especially this site, because it's right near the bottom of a really big hill with a lot of fields going up behind it, and in front of it is a road. So the water has got to go somewhere from this site afterwards. It will go downhill, and the other side, there are problems with flooding instances keep popping up all the time around there. So they will find there's issues to address there, and I know they will find that the drainage network beyond is fragile. You know, I've been told by especially from highways who've had to deal with things. I know Wessex Water have done some improvements down Northgate, but they found those really challenging because of the age of the drains they found. And one thing they found, the drains had fallen, if I remember correctly, literally meters. They were now way lower. I think this is also due to the road being higher, but they were very low, and that caused a lot of problems to them when they tried to upgrade it. So I think as these inquiries go on, they will find there are issues. I've sort of got a question as well. One thing I didn't mention earlier, and I will do, and then the energy condition, I was very pleased to see that was included in the comment, including about heat pumps. So I did wish to say that I thought that was a good condition. So thank you for that. I may well be in a position to make a proposal, but I will ask a question first in relation to some discussion that we've had, and this is to do with housing supply, and there are a number of applications in Riverliscombe for new housing. And we've got congestion problems from the amount of housing we've had already, which I don't feel have been addressed. And each time we add to it, we just add to those problems. And this is a problem with the applications that come forward. There is a particular problem we talked about, that this application, being on the side of town that it is, has particular issues because it funnels in inevitably. People want to go somewhere. They are not all going to stay parked and living and all of their time living within these new housing. They will be going somewhere, and they've got to go through the town centre, unavoidable, and it causes problems. And so development on this side has a particular type of adverse impact because of that, which has to be noted. On the other side of town, where there are applications, don't have quite the same level of problems. Now, can that be taken into account? You know, just because we've got one of the worst applications coming forward from that point of view now, there's other applications in the system that are being determined which will deliver more housing. You know, how is that worked out? How does the planning system deal with that?
the planning system deals with that because the government insists that planning applications are dealt with within a particular time scale, depending on the minor or major application, and the result of statutory consultees and their reports. Now, at the moment, I haven't got anything from Highways saying that they feel that this development of 25 units will cause an issue with or a significant, substantial issue with parking. So our statutory consultee and our expert doesn't agree with you. I realise that's sometimes difficult for the ward members to understand that other people don't agree with their local knowledge, and I understand that. But we are, without the peg to hang the hat on, we're in a position where we can't overturn it when we have no backup for it. If we had some evidence for it, or we had Highways saying, we think that the knock-on effect of an additional 25 homes in this area would cause problems in the town or with the ingress or egress for the town, then we might have somewhere to go, but we don't have that, unfortunately. Yeah, and yeah, I'm going to bring Alison in as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the housing supply point. Unfortunately, we can't take into account future proposals that might come forward within a town or a settlement into our 5-year housing land supply. It's quite clearly prescribed that we have to identify sites which are deliverable within the next 5 years, and even outline applications, particularly on big sites. We can't take account of all of the quantum of housing in those sites in the first 5 years, because we have to recognise that sites will come forward over a period of time. So unfortunately, we can't take those into account. I think that emphasises the importance of the local plan, because that's where, when we go forward in terms of proposing allocations, we can consider in the round the impact on towns and settlements in terms of transport and other infrastructure requirements, and can seek to address those through the local plan. And that's why we're working hard, the team are working really hard to bring forward the local plan as quickly as possible in order to do that and to protect the council and make sure that we do have a 5-year land supply, because obviously that will be one of the things that we have to show as part of an examination on the local plan, is that we have got deliverable sites for a period of the first 5 years of the plan.
Okay, I've got Marcus and Habib that want to speak. So Marcus and then Caro. So do you want to come back, David? I'm very sorry. But David, my apologies.
I
wasn't trying to stop you.
I mean, obviously, I've very much taken account of what's just been said from questions and so on. I will just mention that parking is an issue, because people want to put their cars somewhere where they're going, and that does, I'm afraid, include within town as well. But it's also the congestion and just the problems with people crossing the square, the build up of people getting in each other's way, which happens in the town centre, and any of us living there know it's a big issue. And I have to say, when people visit, they tell me it's an issue as well. So it is a pan, and I think though these are things that don't get taken into account in Highways impact analysis when they do things. These are things that are real, but they're not part of what other people are looking for, and this clearly is an issue. Now, I would be ready to make a proposal, but that said, I think it is important that we do listen to what others have got to say. So I'm happy to wait.
If you don't mind waiting for a moment or two, we'll let people speak. So I've got Marcus, Habib, then Caroline, please.
Thank you, Chair. Much like the last, we had a bit of a balancing situation, didn't we, going on whether the departure from DM2, I think I've got that right, did that outweigh the, did the benefits outweigh the harm? And I must admit that although I can understand the lived experience of your highway issue rather than what the figures say, I think that's probably what Habib was talking about last time in the last application, was his lived experience rather than what the figures say. I think when you're looking at 25 houses, I think you're struggling to come up with a demonstrable harm there compared to the benefit that's we're getting. However, that said, bearing in mind that one of the biggest beefs I have with parish councils, or they come to me with, is the culvert's not big enough and the drainage is not big enough and this isn't happening and this isn't happening. Can you speak to highways? Can you deal with it? And actually that's because it hasn't been dealt with properly in the first place. And as much as I appreciate it's flood zone 1, but appreciate the knock-on effect of that, that's quite interesting. If the thing you said, those culvert investigations weren't complete and that wasn't complete. So although I'd be very reluctant to refuse this application based on that grounds alone, I think there could be an argument to further application for further information on how that is all going to work, because it wouldn't necessarily be this year or next year, it could be in 10 years' time. And that's the only lack of detail. With regard to the DM2, I'm struggling. You look at, and I can appreciate what's being said about, obviously there's a north of Liscombe and south of Liscombe, and I can appreciate how north with Liscombe might not be good for traffic through the town centre, but when anybody looks at that and you look at the landscape harm and everything else, it's possibly not a bad location if you're going to put 25 houses somewhere, bearing in mind how the layout of the village actually is there, looking at it from an outsider looking at in. But I do take into account what's being said about that drainage and that we're not creating a problem elsewhere later on. And this is something we could solve now, because my concern would be that if it's in a condition later, what control does the committee have over that drainage and how that's working? I'm not putting a proposal to defer yet because I don't believe in deferring.
For me, part of the problem is that we shouldn't, it would be unwise for the planning committee to make a decision based on something that we do not have any evidence for, even if we believe strongly that it might be the case. Without the technical experts to tell us, we don't have our own experts, unfortunately. Those days are long gone. Without evidence, we would be in, I think, a very, very sticky position. But I'm happy to ask officers to come in. Zach?
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some reassurance to Councillor Cravis and others on the drainage point that, as I mentioned before, we do have the drainage condition, which basically stops any development until that's been submitted to us. We then consult with the experts and then they confirm that it's acceptable. If or it isn't, absolutely, and if it isn't, then they can't proceed with the development. It would be potentially possible to require, because this is an outline, so there's a reserved matters application. We believe it would potentially meet the tests of reasonableness to include to tweak that condition to require that the drainage scheme is submitted alongside the reserved matters application. If members felt that would give a slight bit more reassurance, so that when you do, if you do come to look at a reserved matter scheme, which you probably will in the future, you would have the comfort of having that drainage scheme having been submitted and already reviewed by internal quantities. That's one possibility if you were, and depending on what the discussion is, I'm sure we can tweak the condition. Paul is able to do that. With what we'd say is, if members are minded to go down that route, that you give delegated authority to the chair in consultation with Chief Planning Officer to come up with a specific wording of that. I don't think we need to worry ourselves with a specific wording here. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. So thank you for the clarification. Habib.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Statement before I raise a couple of points, if you don't mind. It's not all bad, really. Councillor Mansell likes the idea of heat pumps, so do I. And I agree with Councillor Cravis on the highway issue and the sort of possible solution that is being put by our lawyers. On the 2 points that I like to sort of refer to, I think the proximity of the site actually came about. And I think while the site actually lies outside the settlement boundary, It sits directly adjacent to existing housing within walking distance of the town services. This is really important, making the logical edge of the settlement location rather than isolated countryside. My second point is, this site is actually delivering 25 homes, including 7 affordable units that is much needed in small towns such as Williscombe. And I'm minded to actually propose that we agree with the officer's recommendation. That's my proposal, if I have a second.
Okay, well, we'll hang on to that for the moment. We won't get into, I don't want to tie ourselves up in knots in a couple of minutes' time. So we'll hold on to that idea, because I know David wants to consider a proposal as well. I think I take on board the comments from my planning officers regarding the wording of the condition on attenuation, and that culvert in particular, because that would place a timescale on this, giving the developer 6 months to show that it's conformed, and for Wessex Water, our statutory consultees, to say yes, that proposal would address that issue, or no, it would not resolve that condition. So that, I think, would be a sensible consideration at this point. Caroline, who wants to come in?
Yeah, unsurprisingly, I'm not terribly happy about this. I mean, this is okay. It's a similar issue, isn't it, to what we were dealing with before, except that obviously in poor Wivy's case, that land doesn't have any extra designation. It's just open countryside. My issue is you build on one chunk of it, so you're totally changing the boundary, the settlement. The settlement is irrevocably altered. What is countryside has now become part of the town. And then what about a bit next door, where there aren't the hills and trees, or you just take that bit and then you can take another bit, because you can just argue the same stuff, can't you? Oh, a bit of affordable housing. Oh, you might be able to still walk into town. One of the issues I have, it's not an exception site, is it? Because I think there was a Norton application, and I was just like, what are you doing? Because it's not a sustainable location. You can only get in and out really effectively if you drive, right? Because the bus service is like utterly atrocious, and yet we're never actually improving the bus service, but when we put in these extra houses. So I just like, the logic of it escapes me. How can you say, isn't it in our placemaking principles that we want to reduce car dependence on cars, that we want development in sustainable locations, and that isn't that material consideration? It's just like, the logic of this it escapes me. You're fundamentally altering something, and it could get worse. It could just go, oh, another chunk. Oh, we'll have another chunk. We'll have another chunk. And like, that's not placemaking, is it? That's just like ad hoc. Oh, well, that's not too bad, mightn't be too bad. Let's just allow it. We won't get into trouble with government that way, will we? When it's just doesn't make sense.
Okay, I understand the frustration. Okay. The issue for me becomes that we've had unrealistic targets set by government. If we find ourselves still without a 5 years land supply, for the whole of Somerset, so it's now, doesn't matter whether because we used to have 5 years supply in Taunton Deane in those days, and we don't have that now because it's the whole of Somerset. If we persist with that, then the government, the government will, on appeal, allow sites X, Y, and Z. Okay, and with that appeal, we lose control of the site, we lose control of the 106. So we end up with the development and none of the perceived benefits we might have got from our 106 conditions. So we end up with the worst of all cases. So yes, the argument that we allow a little bit and a little bit more, yes, but at least we've got some element of control at this point. Whereas if we allow all applications to go to appeal, we lose any benefits that we might get, because the developers just say, well, we can do it, we can't afford all the things they wanted in the 106. And then suddenly we've got all the development and none of the things that help to mitigate it. And I distinctly dislike giving up any of the benefits we might be able to obtain through a planned development. I'm sorry, Zach, you wanted to come in?
Well,
only correct me.
No, not to correct you at all. No, I agree with what you say. But it was just to really point out that this is a site that we believe is in a sustainable location on the edge of an urban area. We're not talking about a site in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the countryside. Yes, it is technically classed as countryside because it's outside of the urban area, but it's not. This is not removed from the site. And in terms of as sites go, yes, of course, we would prefer all development to go within existing urban areas. But with the targets we've got, and we know what we know is the missive from central government to provide more housing, we have to choose our battles. I think we have to choose our battles carefully. And if members were going to refuse this application, you would have to demonstrate what harm that is, and you would have to demonstrate not only that there's some harm, but that significantly and demonstrably outweighs an otherwise policy compliant scheme that provides affordable housing in a sustainable location. So I agree with what Councillor Cole said in terms of our chance on appeal. Thank you.
I'll make the point again. I've made it earlier today. There are 1.6 million live policy permissions out there. If the developers actually develop those rather than whinging that they haven't got enough land to develop, then we wouldn't have the housing shortage and housing supply problems that we've got. So this is a problem not of our making, and we are in a position where it is very difficult, without planning reasons showing substantial harm, to refuse without good planning reasons, and that's the rub. Now, Harry, you were the last person that wanted to speak, so I'm going around for the third time. So, David.
Thanks. And very interested in the discussion that we've had. I will cover a few things initially to start with. Just housing supply and see how that is impacting our decisions. I will just mention we've got 71 houses being built right at the very moment, Burgess Lane in Wiveliscombe. That's bit well contribute. They're being built right now, so that's adding. And we are aware, because they're live applications, they're on the planning portal, they're submitted to the council. There are other applications for Wiveliscombe which are coming through. Now, I gather we have to consider them in the order they come in and so on, but you can't help but be aware that there's other ones there too, and in different locations. But I've heard what's been said about that. Now, I liked the suggestion made about making sure the drainage is addressed in reserved matters, because we do know this is an issue for this site. So I do think that was definitely a good suggestion, to make sure, if that's where we're going, that comes through with reserved matters. I'd like to mention something else that I also believe is absolutely significant, and it was mentioned a lot in the comments, that there is a problem in the town centre. And okay, highways it's not something highways take into account, but it is an impact of an application on this side of town. I really do think the developer needs to make a contribution to address that. I would say the minimal contribution they should make, and we saw a whole number of these in the last application that came through, would be £25,000 to the town council to make improvements to the town centre. I think that is an absolute minimal thing that should be expected. Now, with that said, I'm still minded though that I think this is the wrong location for for housing. I accept there's some benefits to where it is, it being fairly close to town. I won't dispute that. But there are impacts from the fact that it's outside the settlement boundary, and the settlement boundary was drawn to show where there could be allocations, and there are allocations, and including allocations where there are no current applications in Wiveliscombe. You know, they could, if a developer wants to make even more applications, then they're all coming in outside the settlement boundary and not within it, and yet there are still sites, I will mention it, off Croft Way, where there isn't applications as yet coming forward within the settlement boundary. Now, there is an impact here as far as landscape is concerned, and coalescing that gap between Wiveliscombe and Langley Marsh. And there have been a few encroachments into that already, but that was only done for exception sites, not for anything else, when there was much bigger benefit in terms of the housing that was going to be delivered than this one, although there is some benefit. But the other applications delivered lots more, which this one isn't. So, and because the town centre has not been addressed, but it's a real impact, I would like to propose that we refuse, based on the settlement regarding DM2, and especially with regard also including that both the coalescing and the landscape impact that will happen.
Okay, hang on a second before we look for a seconder for that. We have 10 minutes left of our allocated time, and I really would like to get this settled. So just before we make decisions that are difficult or impossible to defend, okay, well, I need to make sure that everybody else is content with where they are in this, because I don't want to find ourselves on the wrong side of this for the wrong reasons. I think, whilst I accept that you are unhappy with the proposal in its entirety, and particularly in certain things, I'm going to bring the case officer in because I'm not sure about the request for money for Wivy Town Centre is doable, but I'm going to double check before I say that.
Sorry, Chair, I just need to interrupt briefly because we've reached a 3-hour limit, so you need to formally propose an extension now.
I'd like to formally propose an extension. Right. Okay, is that everybody happy with that? Yeah, that's unanimous, right? Okay, thank you, Josh. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So to secure Section 106 contributions, you need a few things. First being a policy requirement that you're going to link it to. The second is you need to demonstrate how the contribution you're seeking fixes a specific impact from the development. And we've heard about and I sympathise with pre-existing conditions in Wiveliscombe. But I don't see how a contribution from this scheme can lawfully secure a contribution to fix a pre-existing problem, or how it has been evidenced that the contribution sought directly mitigates the impact of just this development, which is what we need to do to be able to justify a Section 106 contribution. Hopefully that helps. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay. David.
I well observed there was an application by Gladman for the field opposite, which did nearly go to appeal, but Gladman actually withdrew on the first day of the appeal, which was interesting. Now, they did propose town centre improvements. So at least the developer in that case did choose to acknowledge the problems, and they did offer some mitigation for that. So there is precedent, albeit for a withdrawn application, and it's literally for the field opposite.
So I don't know the exact specifics of that application, but developers can make contributions. The issue is we can't give it weight in the planning balance. So it might have been that the developer made a voluntary contribution that we then didn't give it any weight in the planning balance because it wasn't necessary. Without knowing the details of the contribution and how it was calculated, I couldn't inform you, but just because one developer has some way doesn't mean we can insist on it on this application.
Okay. Any other speakers quickly? No other speakers. Okay. Just before we search for a seconder for David's proposal.
Councillor Pugsley,
Sorry,
Councillor Pugsley proposed.
Councillor Pugsley.
No, councillor Barber.
High.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
councillor
yeah,
Barber
yeah.
highlighted his first. So he has
No,
no,
no.
we have to take the order their point.
Hang on, hang on.
Before
Right.
Councillor Barberhine that I wanted to make a proposal. I believe that is absolutely true.
Right, the last thing I want to do is tie this committee up in knots. Okay, we have a situation where we need to make a decision on this proposal as it is, not on this proposal mixed in with a bit of another proposal or what we might like this to be. So I believe that Councillor Barberhine's proposal was put forward before yours, David. I know you disagree with me, but I'm going to check with the clerk. Can we just check that? Well,
Clearly make the
yeah,
proposal.
that's
And we need to
okay.
be
Well,
seconded.
I don't. Of course you can. Of course you can, David. I'm trying to give you as much time as you need to make all your comments. I'm not trying to stop you, David. I'm just trying to make sure that what we do is sustainable.
Look, I will accept that. So I will make a slight comment on it, but just allow me to make the comment and we can then move on, including me. If anyone wants to check the recording, they will find that I said I wish to make a proposal. I've learned a lesson that I need to do more than that. And sorry, I didn't realise that not only that I've got to make my proposal, even though I said I wouldn't. But I definitely said I wanted to make a proposal. But look, we'll move on. Okay. Now, you're going to put me in a slightly tricky position, but so I think we're heading for Councillor Farber-High's proposal. Can we hear that, and can I then make a comment on it? And could I just make a comment to the developer? I'm trying to find a way forward here. That the developer has not made a contribution to solving a problem in the town centre. Now, it looks like the council cannot find a way to make you do that from the comment the officers are doing. Now, Gladman, who is not a popular developer in the area, shall we say, they voluntarily came forward with an option. Would you accept a 25,000 contribution through the Section 106 to address problems in our town centre?
Sorry, I'm really sorry, David. We cannot impose conditions for financial contributions outside of the report. We cannot, even if the developer would say, we would certainly consider that. Okay, that has absolutely zero weight, and we do not have the authority to do that as a committee.
I'm not asking
No.
for the committee to do it. I'm asking if the developer will do it.
Sorry, we can't negotiate at a planning committee meeting about things we might like to have happen as a result of an application.
Thank you.
We're just not able to do that. I mean, sorry.
Chair, you're correct. I mean, the bottom line is you've got a proposal before you. It sets out exactly what this is going to deliver. That is what we want you to vote on. Simple as, I'm afraid.
Okay, Councillor Farber-High, can I hear your proposal, please?
You may. My proposal is that we agree with the officer's recommendation, possibly with the drainage scheme that will be submitted with reserved matters as conditions. Simple.
Okay, is there a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Norman. Okay, and are you content that the condition proposed on drainage is agreed between the chair and the chief planning officers, and that it comes back to reserve matters? That's the point. That's the control element. So are you content that that is the route? Yeah, okay. In that case, can we have a vote then, please, on the proposal that we accept the officer's recommendation with an additional condition on the drainage to be agreed, to come back at reserve matters having been agreed? Stephen? No
I
problem.
just wanted to make one comment. I know exactly the position that Councillor Mansell is coming from.
I understand the position.
Indeed. But I think, unfortunately, in this case, certainly the landscape issues that we had in the last application, I don't think are anywhere near as strong in this one. I think it's very much more difficult to put them forward as a ground for rejection. I think this is one where we try to take what wins we can, and getting the attenuation and the culvert sorted as part of any approval here, I think is a positive and it's a win. But I'm afraid I don't immediately see that the grounds for rejecting this are particularly strong. And I think in the absence of those grounds, it makes it very difficult for us to do anything other than to accede to the application. I'm afraid.
Thank you for that. I couldn't have put it better myself. That's where I want to had it proposed and seconded. Before we go to the vote, does anybody want to make a further comment? I'm not seeing anybody wishing to make further comments. Okay, so the proposal and seconded is that we approve this application with an additional drainage condition, wording of which to be sorted out between myself as chair and the chief planning officers, and that comes back agreed by the reserved matters date, so that we know that we are going forward with an agreed condition on the drainage. Okay, wording to follow on that. Can I see those in favour, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 with me. 7. Can I see those against, please? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 against. 4 against. Okay, that has passed. Any abstentions? Sorry, just before I check, it's as Caroline Ayres, Dave Mansell, Nick O'Donnell, and Gwyl Wren. Were those against?
It's only 10 though.
So, what, 7, 6, 4. Sorry, it's 6-4. Sorry, it's 6-4. My maths is escaping me. O-level maths was a very long time ago. So I'm now going to thank you, everybody. I'm now going to adjourn the meeting. Don't forget, we're going to be back at 2. There is a light lunch prepared.
We're not adjourning it, it's finished.
Sorry?
It's the
This meeting is closed. There is another meeting starting at 2 when you've had a light lunch.